As you know, last year was the 100th anniversary. So this year is the 101st anniversary for the 19th Amendment and the women's right to vote. So we're really pleased that AIAA LALV is again sponsoring a program to commemorate this. And we have got a great lineup for you today, a combination of speakers and panels. And so we're so happy that you can join us. Our theme actually is a little bit aviation theme, because in addition to our keynote speaker, who's going to talk on from passengers to pilots, we also have several of our panelists that are also pilots as well too. So so it's very exciting that what we have in terms of the distinguished panelists and speakers that we have today. So I'd like to first introduce our keynote speaker, who, as I said, her theme is from passengers to pilots. It's Ms. Leslie Czechowski, and Leslie has a very interesting job. She is a docent up at the Museum of Flight in Seattle. And I know I have been up there in person. For those of you who have been up there, you know what a thrill it is to see that museum. You know, one of the stellar examples in terms of flight up there, in terms of what they have and their artifacts. And Leslie serves as a docent up there. She has a very distinguished background in terms of library science and archiving and history, and so is a really perfect speaker for this topic that has a historical theme to it. Her bachelor's is in drama theory. She has an MS in library science, so certified librarian, and also a master's in liberal studies, so very interested in history. She had a concentration in 19th century American history and literature, and has worked in a variety of positions in library and archives, and now is serving as a docent at the Museum of Flight in Seattle. And she also authors publications and presents quite often on library and archival services, and also on this topic of from passengers to pilots, which she has done a lot of research on. So I'm going to turn it over to our keynote speaker, Leslie. So over to you. And she's a pilot. She is a pilot as well. So, you know, I talked about the theme that we have for this whole program. We have several panelists that actually are pilots, what I think is way cool. So it kind of fits in with the theme that Leslie talked about. So as I said, Jennifer's an attorney. She's a partner and co-chair of Tressler's Transportation Practice Group. So welcome, Jennifer. And we checked your comm check earlier, so I think you are good. Yes, there's Jennifer. Then another pilot, we have Dr. Anita Sengupta. She is the CEO and founder of Hydroplane Limited. She also is from my alma mater, USC. She received her MS and PhD in aerospace engineering from USC, and she's a research associate professor there. Formerly, she worked at NASA, and I understand this morning she was actually continuing her work on getting her commercial pilot's license. So that's she's currently an instrument rated pilot. So welcome, Anita. Do you want to check your comm for us?
Yes, thank you for having me. Good morning, everyone.
Yeah, very good. Welcome. And then we have Dr. Swati Sasena. She is an AIAA Lifetime Senior Member, so made the investment to be a lifetime member and is currently a senior member of the society. She serves as a technical and project manager from ANSYS Incorporated, and she also has her PhD degree in aerospace engineering from Penn State. So welcome, Swati. Do you want to check your comm?
Yes, sure. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
All right, so those are our panelists. And then in addition, I mentioned that Leslie will also be joining us. So what I've asked the panelists to do is for each of them to to start with, I've given everyone 5 minutes of the 5 remaining panelists that have joined us to give some input of something related to their career and profession. So it could be, you know, a personal story, could something that they feel has been important in their career. But I've kind of asked each of them as first to kind of provide some of that context as we get into talking about careers. And so we can go ahead and do that now. And why don't we start then with Claudine?
All right. So I was interested in aviation at a very young age. I wanted to be an astronaut. So I went to high school for aerospace engineering. In New York, we have Brooklyn Tech High School, and they have aerospace engineering as a major. And I think it served me well. I then went on to college to major in aerospace and mechanical engineering. And my job, it was the end of the Cold War era when I entered the field. So the jobs did come in mechanical engineering, as my professors told me, and that's part of the reason I got mechanical engineering degree as a backup for my aerospace. But I quickly was able to leave the automotive industry and go into aerospace, first working at Raytheon Missile Systems in Tucson, and then Raytheon Aircraft, which was formerly known as Beechcraft. So I really appreciate all of the photos of the Beechcraft and the stories about what they call Mob Beach, etc. So from there, I went over to Czechowski and worked, which was purchased by Lockheed Martin. And I am currently a principal systems engineer at Lockheed Martin Skunk Works. I'm really excited to be here. I'm also the AIAA Diversity and Working Group Chair.
Thank you, Claire. Next, Claudine. Next, Claire, over to you.
Thank you, and thanks for having me. Let's see, I'm probably the oldest person here. So I graduated from college in 1979. Even majoring in engineering was maybe a little random. I started college as a math and Russian major, but then I decided I wanted, quote unquote, a real career. I didn't want to just teach, which was what I thought would happen if I just did math and Russian. So hiring was good when I graduated. The companies were being pressured to hire women. So, it's funny. There's a manager at Hughes, which was later bought by Boeing, who went out to. I was probably pretty close to the top woman because I was really almost the only woman. So, but I wasn't necessarily at the top of my class. Getting through college in engineering at the time, it was challenging. Being one of the only women, not a great support network. All of my studying I did on my own. Study groups weren't a thing, so it was a challenge. But what was good is that Hughes was hiring. I hired into the propulsion department. Frankly, I hated propulsion. I wanted to know everything about everything, and propulsion was not it. So I ended up, after about a year, transferring to the system test department. And it was a great opportunity for me because as a female, I did not have a whole lot of hands-on time. So I call it my cable dragging days, and cables to wire up a spacecraft or to hook a spacecraft up to power, or, they're bigger than large garden hoses and heavy. So anyway, I got a ton of experience in testing. I learned how to test every subsystem. I spent a year off-site in Canada, which was a huge learning experience for me because there I felt like I was representing the company. So I had to study a lot. I had to do, if things didn't get done by the small team in Canada, it didn't get done. So there wasn't the support network that a big, company back in LA has. So then I came back from Canada. By that time I was married and was on the verge of having a son. So I decided system tests 24/7 wasn't the best thing. So I transferred to systems engineering. Unfortunately, they were hiring, and it really felt like going home. It was like a small program office. It was a support network. I had mentors. Every person on the systems engineering team, because I was probably one of the youngest, became a mentor and really gave me the opportunity to learn, to strengthen what I learned in my cable dragging days to understand more about systems and end-to-end how systems work and shuttle integration and writing procedures astronauts executed. And so all that was fun. And over time, I moved into more senior positions and eventually became a program manager for a relatively recurring, so a pretty simple spacecraft. But I was, it was that after 14 years, so I was pretty young as a program manager, but it was a great starter program. And then after I ran the program for several years, I was asked to join line management. So I started to run large organizations, first as a deputy and then as a business unit leader. And then eventually I moved back to program management, but of much more bigger, more complicated programs. And eventually I was promoted to vice president. So my main message is that careers are not linear. What I just described sounds super linear, like you move from one job to the next and more responsibility and everything's wonderful. But I had some major setbacks of, not necessarily being fired, but really knowing that it was time to go do something different, and then having to really reconsider my career path and my values and what was important. And so again, my message to some level is that, if what your drive is to make it a senior person, it takes a ton of perseverance. It takes fighting through the setbacks and coming to work every day with a positive attitude, whether you've had a setback or not, and not having a chip on your shoulder. I know many women who kind of had a chip on their shoulder, and they almost then became disenfranchised with management because their attitude was almost that of a victim. So I'm a huge fan of Sheryl Sandberg and her Lean In book, and there's a Lean In website, and it's people telling stories. But what that to me is about is showing up, being present, sitting at the table, not sitting around the edge of the room, trying hard. When things go bad, have a positive attitude and keep on trying. And definitely find mentors, sponsors, people who can help, because the way that you get ahead is through the network. It's not necessarily through the quote unquote the standard HR system. So it's really good to have people you can talk to and who can help you. So fight on. Back to you, Marilee.
Thank you, Claire. Lots of great context there. So next we'll go to Jennifer, and I think Jennifer's a really good example of how you can be interested in aerospace and aviation and then pick a different career than say engineering. So Jennifer, over to you for an opening statement.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Perdigao, and I was a bit of the age. My grandparents went through World War II, so my grandfather was a bomber pilot. Also, but he flew a seaplane, and so I think growing up, and he was in aviation insurance his entire life, almost from the time the war ended. He went to USC, and then he went into insurance. And so growing up, my entire, and half the family was also in aviation insurance. And my grandparents on my other side, one worked for Hughes and one worked for McDonnell Douglas. So every dinner conversation, and aviation has always kind of captured the imagination. It's just one of those things that, once you get sucked in, you're sucked in for life. So, at a young age, I wanted to be a pilot, but my dad had issues with small airplanes. So when I was about 15 or 16, I kept being pushed to take flying lessons, and my dad's like, absolutely not. And so anyway, but I never lost my love for aviation. So I went to law school, became an aviation attorney, because what I like to do is, what we do a lot of is investigation into, the aircraft accidents. Matter of fact, yesterday I spent the day at Van Nuys Airport. We were going through wreckage of a helicopter. And it sounds a little depressing, but it's just fascinating. Why do these things happen? What went wrong in the process? And so finally, about 7 years ago, I actually finally went and got my pilot's license. And, you know, I think one of the things that I learned from my grandfather is his business associates in aviation were also his friends. So, you know, these are the people that we had, that we socialized with. These are the people that, and aviation people and aerospace people, there really aren't any greater people to spend time with. So, you know, it's just always been, it's just always been kind of this goal in my mind. If I can do something I love, be in an industry that I love, and be around people that I like to be around, then it's not going to seem like work. Then it's going to seem like this is just, and everybody talks about work-life balance. And it's hard if you have, I'm just going to take like employment law. There's nothing really social about that. Yeah, it's just like, and everything's very segregated. But, you know, in my world, I'm going to a 99s conference, which is the Women's Pilot Organization, in a couple of weeks. I have some clients there, but most of it will just be fun. And then in October, I'll go to the International Aviation Women's Association. And again, there's a lot of overlap between my personal and business life, which just makes it easier because, you know, we can go and have some fun, but we can also get some business done. And, you know, at the end of the day, then we can talk about planes over a couple drinks. So I think for me, it was just, one, there's a love of aviation. Two, a love for aviation people. And, you know, three, getting it all to work together. And I think that's how I ended up in the career I'm in. And I never looked back.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, that's certainly true. I can definitely resonate with that idea of that if you make your colleagues and versus professional organizations are that they're also not just your colleagues, but your friends, then it really helps with the work-life balance because you just love being with them, but it's also related to what you do. So I can definitely, link with that idea. Okay, so next we have Dr. Anita Sengupta. So Anita, over to you.
Thank you. And I've really enjoyed listening to everyone's journey so far. So my journey, I think, it largely did start off with aerospace and aviation since I was a small child. I was born in the UK, moved to the US when I was small. So every summer we would fly back and forth on a 747 between New York and initially Shannon Airport in Ireland because it was too far to be able to make it all the way to London and eventually over to London. And I remember when I was a little kid, my dad, who was a PhD mechanical engineer, taught me about aerodynamic lift. And I thought a plane taking off was like magic. And he told me sort of what was actually going on behind it. I'm also an enormous science fiction fan. I used to watch Star Trek with my dad when I was a little kid. So I kind of always knew I wanted to be involved in the space program. I went and got all of my degrees, BS, MS, PhD in aerospace engineering. And ironically, I was going to go full on from my undergraduate to do my PhD at USC, but Boeing came to interview at my school. And I'm like, okay, I'll interview with them, see what it's like. And they told me, oh, if you come to work for us, we'll pay for your graduate school and we'll pay for you to get your pilot's license. I was like, oh, that sounds like a great deal. So I decided to go to school part-time for my master's degree, work full-time for Boeing, and started working on my private pilot's license as part of their program. So they paid for once you got your solo and they paid for you once you get your license. And I eventually finished my PhD. I went over to JPL, NASA JPL, and focused for 5 years on my PhD work, which is in ion propulsion, and then shifted over to something completely different, which was entry, descent, and landing systems for Mars, working on aerodynamic accelerators. So it's kind of like the opposite of being aerodynamically efficient, which an airplane should be, and being aerodynamically inefficient to reduce drag. I then became a manager for 5 years, working on the development of a payload for the International Space Station. And after about 16 years working for NASA, I got recruited to work in the green transportation space as an executive at Virgin Hyperloop. So this was my first foray into something with an Earth-based application as opposed to a space or interplanetary application. And that really got me interested in being an entrepreneur. It got me interested in thinking about what I could do as an engineer and as a leader to address new technology to support climate change. And then I went into the electric aviation space. I was a co-founder for an eVTOL company for 2 years, where I learned all about putting batteries in airplanes and how a bit limiting that is. And then I decided to start a new company, my own company, which I'm the founder of, which is putting hydrogen fuel cells into aircraft to really facilitate having emission-free air travel. And during the pandemic, I wanted to do something to help sort of my local community. And so I started to volunteer at the food bank in LA, at different sites in sort of the San Fernando Valley. And I saw these people wearing this shirt there. I'm like, oh, what's that? And they're like, we're the Civil Air Patrol. I'm like, what's the Civil Air Patrol? I've never heard that before. And so then I joined the Civil Air Patrol. So I've been a member for just not even a year yet, and I'm now a captain in the Civil Air Patrol. You're able to advance more quickly if you have advanced degrees and a professor. I'm a professor at USC as well, and I'm training to be a search and rescue pilot now. I finished my mission scanner rating, my mission observer rating, and I have to say it's absolutely exhilarating to be part of an operational scenario, using your skills as an engineer, using your skills as a pilot, using your skills as a leader to kind of help people here at home. And so aviation definitely is my life now, whether it is my company, or whether it's what I teach in my university role, or what I do in my free time as a captain in the Civil Air Patrol. So I absolutely love aviation, and sort of the sky is not the limit when it comes to the job opportunities that are out there right now. So this is the time to get into it. Thanks.
Great. Yeah, that's amazing background in aviation. So Anita, just amazing. Next we have Dr. Swati Sasena. Over to you, Swati.
All right, thank you, Marilee. Really, glad to hear all these stories and such great achievements of you all. So growing up, I got interested in aerospace vehicles, just different kind of vehicles that are out there. Got interested in how they design, how they're designed, how they perform, how they can fly and all of that, and the aerodynamic drag, what's lift, what's drag, and all those things I got familiar with when I was growing up. And when I was a child, I also was very interested in astronomy, and at some point of time I thought aerospace and astronomy are very related and are similar. It's true to an extent, but they're totally there's like a different worlds as well. So so after I grew up, after my high school, I got a chance to study aerospace engineering at IIT Kanpur, Indian Institute of Technology Kanpur, which is a premier engineering institution in India. So I was fortunate enough to get admitted there, and it's the only institution in India with an aerospace engineering degree which has its own airstrip, and also we used to have a very active gliding club, few Cessnas, few Piper aircraft. So that really opened up the world for me. I got a chance to fly those aircrafts, sit next to the pilot in the cockpit and see how the controls work and all of that. So that was a really, really good experience. After finishing my bachelor's, I came to the US for my graduate studies, and I did that from Penn State, both my master's and PhD. And during my graduate studies, I got a chance to work on projects with companies like Boeing and Pratt and Whitney, which was very, very good exposure I got with working on some of the challenging problems they were looking at. So my area of research was aeroacoustics. So I was developing models and methods to calculate the noise generated from a jet engine, a fighter aircraft, and so on. It was very interesting to see what kind of what's the huge range you see in terms of the acoustic signature of these aircrafts, and what kind of methods are employed to make them to reduce the noise. So that was a very good experience working with Boeing and Pratt and Whitney during my PhD. And I was also fortunate enough to be awarded the Amelia Earhart Fellowship that the Zonta International gives every year for women pursuing higher studies in aerospace engineering. I believe they give out around 35 such fellowships every year. So that was a very big motivation, motivation, and something that I was really fortunate enough to get at that point of time. That was a big, big motivation. So after finishing my PhD from Penn State, I got recruited by GE Global Research Center in upstate New York. They have a huge research facility there. And as most of you might be familiar with GE, they make gas turbine engines for both aviation and land-based power generation applications. So I got a chance to work on some really, really cool technology at the research center on their some of their engines, both aviation and land-based power, mostly GE9X, GE9X, and LEAP engines on for the aviation side. Some very interesting problems like engine icing, sand ingestion in engines as they operate in these environments where you have a lot of dust and particulates in the atmosphere, how that affects the engine performance. So that that was really good experience there. So after working there for 5 years, almost 5 years, little over 5 years, I moved to the West Coast, so in the Bay Area, and then I joined ANSYS, where I'm currently working at, and it's a world leader in engineering simulation and modeling software. So I'm really intrigued by the breadth of tools they have across different physics. And one of the most important industry vertical that we work with at ANSYS is FA&D, Federal Aerospace and Defense. And I'm currently working with some of our large customers in this domain, OEMs, government, and government as well on the federal side, with some of the ANSYS products. And for example, one of the projects that I was really interested in, it was a really good experience again to work on, was we were looking at new methods to disinfect aircraft cabins last year, when after COVID had hit, to clean them more efficiently. So things like using UV light for cleaning, for disinfecting aircraft cabins more quickly and more efficiently, looking at different kind of sprays and all of that. So that's recently that's what I have been working on. So really great experience so far. And at AIA as well, I've been pretty active at the local chapter here in the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm currently the Honors and Awards Director here. So I try to remain involved in some of the STEM related activities we have at both high school level and also at the undergraduate level here at the universities and schools.
Thank you, Swati, and such a global perspective too, from starting in India with your career journey. And then I'd like to give Leslie a bit of time as well too. I am particularly interested because of your career journey, because you started doing library science at, after you graduated at Grinnell College, University of Minnesota, and University of Pittsburgh. So, but I was kind of interested because you must have done a variety of things. What got you most interested in kind of aviation, and then led to now where you're been doing that and also serving as a docent? So how did that happen? Leslie, are you on mute?
Yes, I just
Okay,
unmuted myself, sorry.
Good. Good. Thanks.
Interesting question. The reason I got involved was because after I retired, we moved to the Seattle area, and I wanted to find things to do, and volunteering in an archive seemed like a really great thing. And I was able to hook up with the people from the Museum of Flight. So it wasn't the subject matter so much in the beginning as it was just having an opportunity to volunteer in an organization. where I could do some work that I would be familiar with. Soon the opportunity came to get involved as a docent and be trained as a docent, which is not quite as much as getting an advanced degree, but they put us through a long series of classes to become a docent in a variety of reasons and types of information. So it wasn't until I started doing that that I developed an interest in aviation, and what has really made it something that I've become fascinated by is the links between aviation and history. And as I've thought about it over the years, being, I think I am older, Claire, than other people in this group, I recognize that in some ways you can tell the history of the 20th century through aviation. And I think the same thing will be true for the early part of the 21st century, because so much of what has happened has either come about because of advances in aviation or various relationships like that. And I just find that connection really important. And then for me, my only real connection with aviation is as a passenger. And I've not flown quite as often back and forth the pond to the UK as was it Anita did? But I love to fly as a passenger. And in another time, I might have been able to become a pilot. So for right now, I just fly as a passenger and have found some other interesting stories relating to my personal past that I can share with visitors and that inform my life and my work at the museum. But I'm fascinated by what you all have to say, because it seems to me that one real important connection that I heard from a lot of you is just how important it is to make connections within people in your field. And as I've looked at women in aviation, what I have seen is how important women were. Certainly for many of you, you're not going to be able just to focus on women in your profession that you're looking forward to, but men and women. But those connections are what make a huge difference, aren't they?
Yeah, very, very insightful thoughts. So thanks for that, Leslie. We did have, before I get into some other questions, we did have one quick question that I missed when we were doing the Q&A, but I think it would be of interest to everybody. Someone asked, what is the most interesting question that you've ever received while a docent? Anything that strikes you as being like the most interesting question somebody asked?
Sorry, we get so many questions that I can't even pick one out. So sorry, it's a really good question to ask, and I wish I had a good answer for it.
Yep. Well, I certainly can recognize the training that you must have to go through. I mean, with, you know, everything that the museum has. And so being a volunteer, a docent does definitely require, you know, both the education and then being comfortable. I mean, you can see from your talk how comfortable you are speaking. I want to turn to this. So anyone who has questions can put them in the chat for our panelists. I'd like to start with the area of mentors and advocates for people in their careers. Claire had mentioned that, how important that was to her. So I'd like to start with this question. And actually, Claudine, I'd like to ask you about it, because being chair of the AIAA diversity working group, I think it's well known that having mentors or advocates within one's career is really needed, and I think especially very important if you're underrepresented in a particular area. So maybe you might want to answer that question first about the importance of mentors and advocates, and maybe a little bit about what you, as your working group, kind of recommends that people do for that. Over.
Yeah, there was a question earlier about, someone who has a child who's interested in aerospace or interested in STEM, and AIAA has recently launched the high school memberships. So those high school memberships those high schoolers are able to get mentors in AIAA, which is amazing, which is something, I wish I had when I was, in high school. So they're able to get mentors through AIAA. We also have a number of programs where we have an official mentoring program within AIAA where you can sign up to be either a mentor or a mentee. I personally in my career have always had a number of different mentors and advocates who are familiar with my work, who can, when I'm not in the room, they can say, I think Claudine would be a great person to do this job. In fact, to being the diversity and inclusion lead, I was a result of someone advocating for me because as I was raising my daughter, I kind of stepped back from, AIAA, et cetera, and hadn't been as engaged. And they know my daughter is now a teenager. So they were like, oh, maybe you can get back in. And, it was a result of, someone advocating for me. I think it's really important to have diverse mentors. So not just someone who looks like you, because that's going to limit the perspective, that may limit the perspective of advice that you get. But having, somebody who looks like you, somebody who has similar background, but also someone who doesn't, because you can get a 360 view of, the challenges or the things that you're looking for guidance on. And I always encourage people to have mentors and, seek out mentors. It's really important because, no one can do it on their own, right? Everybody, I tell my nephews, even the president of the United States has mentors. They have their counsel because you want to be intentional with your life. You want to be intentional with the things that you do in your life. And you don't want to always leave things to chance. So mentoring helps you plan what you're going to do in your life and your career. So I think it's really important. And I think AIAA is definitely developing the tools to help members at various levels connect with mentors.
Great, thanks, Claudine. Any other of our panelists want to talk about a mentor in their careers that really was important in terms of something that then brought them on their career journey?
I could say something which is slightly an aside to that, which is
Sure.
I completely second Claudine's comments. And I actually have a little bit of a sad story on that, which is that it took me about 10 years into my career before I even had a mentor. I didn't know what mentors were. And I found out, sadly, that all of my male colleagues had mentors for years. And so when I found out about it, I was like, why don't I have a mentor? And it actually does hold you back quite a bit without having one. But I went out and got 5 mentors. So then I got a really large supply of people helping me from different perspectives. And hearing people's different perspectives is kind of the right way to do it. And I was in a management role, so that was the time for it. But because of that, I now actively participate as a mentor in aerospace mentorship programs. There's 2 that are great for aerospace. One is MAT Fellowship, which is for new space jobs. It comes with a executive mentor, could be me, and then also comes with a summer internship and a great network of people. And the other is Brooke Owens Fellowship, which is an aviation and aerospace a mentorship program for women in those career fields. I'm also an executive mentor there, also comes with a fellowship. So it is so important to your careers to go out and seek that mentor, as well as to be a mentor for other people.
Yeah, no, very, very valid. And it's true. I mean, yeah, mentors are so important. And so both to find some for yourself, as well as to then pay it back going forward. Very, very important, Anita. I'll just share one quick story myself. Claire had mentioned about how, she was originally thinking she'd be a teacher and then went into engineering. And it was kind of the same thing for me too. I was in math and thought I'd be a teacher, right? I mean, that's kind of what I thought of the career, that if you were in math, and I really didn't have folks around me that were in engineering at that time. And I was on a semester at sea program, and it was actually a history professor of a class I was taking on in that program. And I was, he's asked me what I wanted to do, and I said, oh, I'm going to be a teacher. I'm going to teach math. And of course, he was a professor at the university and then teaching on the semester at sea. And he said, if that is like absolutely your goal, that you just have this passion, that's what you want to do is teach. He said, that's great. But he said, if you as a woman are going into teaching because you feel like that's the only career available to you, have you ever thought about engineering? And so here, I think, it was, you know, when I reflect back on that story, and it was after then I got off at semester at sea, then I started looking into engineering programs and then kind of turned toward that. And so I think sometimes the other thing is about mentors is Claudine's point, it's not, you know, it's kind of a diversity thing, and you never know where kind of some of that career advice is going to come. So here it was, you know, through someone that was a history professor, but really had a very profound message that then kind of changed the whole career arc. So, you know, mentors and advice can come from a lot of different places. From our panelists, any other thoughts on mentoring that you'd like to share with everyone?
Actually, I was just going to mention one thing. Early in your careers, I think definitely mentors are absolutely important, but I think it just doesn't end early in your career. I think it's helpful because I'm chair of the transportation practice, and that's kind of what I always want to do. Well, I always, in my mind, it was the aviation practice, but our transportation practice encompasses our aviation, maritime, and trains, and whatever that falls within. So, but then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, what are my next goals? And so I'm 46. I was kind of mid-career, and I'm thinking, oh, wait a minute, this was my goal. I'm now there. What is my next step? And actually, it was kind of timely because all of a sudden the firm was kind of looking. A lot of people had kind of reached this point where they'd kind of reached their goal in their career, but they're just mid-career. So what is next for them? And so our firm actually started a mentor program where, you know, the people, kind of the generation ahead of us, you know, you can kind of, instead of having, you know, basically help you move on from your goals that you've already achieved, and, you know, formulate new goals and how to help you get there, and how to help you see additional possibilities that are out there, things you can do, and not to just kind of like, oh, I reached where I need to be and here I am. So I think it's important throughout your career to have a mentor, and even, you know, even when you're mid-career and, you know, you're just kind of at a crossroads, where do I go from here? And so I think that's actually been very helpful.
On mute.
Marilee,
Swati,
you
would
are
like to
on
say
mute.
something?
Yes, just, you know, one quick point that came to my mind. It might be useful here. So as we talk about mentors and advocates and sponsors, I mean, we all agree that it's very important for our career as we go through this journey, our career journey, and how to expand our, you know, network, or how to be able to find these mentors, which are, so most of the time the people we work with every day, those are the people we end up going to and ask if they would like to be as our mentor. Most have seen, at least that was I was doing. And what I found out that it could limit their perspective or the topics we end up discussing, because they are the ones who I'm working with on a regular basis. So it wouldn't give me that 360-degree perspective as we were discussing before. So what I found useful, to be able to find build connections and find mentors from people who we don't know or we don't usually work with, is by getting more involved in these clubs that we have at our workplace, like women in technology clubs, or a diversity club, for example. And both at GE and at ANSYS, I've been part of the women in technology clubs, and through that I've been able to meet people who are really good mentors and who I would have not met otherwise, and I would not have gotten the opportunity to connect and learn from. And they exposed me to a lot of different opportunities, and also provided me very honest feedback, because I was also not very inhibited in talking to them openly, because I was not working with them on a regular basis. So I was very open about what my challenges are, where I want to focus on, how I want to grow. So just that has helped me a lot. Just wanted to share that.
Yep, very, very important point. If anyone else has, otherwise I'll move to another area of questioning. And I just also want to remind our attendees, there is a Q&A area too, where you can enter questions. So feel free as folks are talking, if you think of any questions, please enter them in. A couple of folks mentioned about, the importance of professional associations, AIAA, or I think when Jennifer was talking, she was saying about how, a lot of the professional organizations that she's involved in, of course, are related to things that she's also doing in her career. So I want to get people's sense about what have you found to be specifically helpful, and what has the role of networking in professional groups been in your career development? And I also was interested in terms of, is it external organizations are also maybe being in as not as a heavily represented field by women, have some women's groups, like Jennifer mentioned about the 99s, which is a women's pilots association. So what kind of impact have those had on your career, professional groups, either in terms of your broader career area, or say a women's group that provided support for you? Anyone like to start with that?
I can go ahead and start. I think there's kind of three additional organizations that I've been involved in, and kind of the original one was the Aviation Insurance Association. And going back to my grandfather's, he was one of the original members of that. So what made it easy for me is, even though originally there were really maybe 10 women out of 600 people that came, probably more than that, but it just seemed like there were very few. And but what made it easy is because while my grandfather was no longer attending these, I'd grown up knowing a lot of these people, so it made it easy for me. So it was almost going to a family event, even though and so I was able to make a lot of connections and meet a lot of people, and a lot of people were willing to take me under their wing. And essentially because it went back to, my grandfather was just very well loved in the industry. So that is a conference that I never miss, and I've just made a lot of connections. We get most of our work from the insurance companies that insure the aviation companies and manufacturing companies and airlines. So so we're actually usually talking a lot to the insurance carriers. So this has been a great organization for me. Now the 99s would be more of a social organization. It's there's about, I think there's about 6,000 members worldwide. There's an annual conference every year, and I'm actually on the board of the Southwest section of the 99s. And I've just met a lot of great pilots. Actually, one of the founding members of our chapter is a WASP. She's still alive. She turned 100. We had a Zoom birthday party for her. And she's been great too. This is kind of going along with Mentor. She's 100. She just lost her medical to fly, but she's still flying because she flies with another pilot. But anyway, so I mean, she's kind of that quintessential aviation person that just loves it so much. She never, she's still, I think I met her when she was about 92. And I mean, she's still as vibrant at 100 as she was at 92. But, and then, but going back to the last organization that I participate in a lot is the International Aviation Women's Association. And I do highly, anybody who is on the aviation side, I do highly recommend that one, because it's basically women executives in aviation companies and you have to go through an application process to make sure you're actually in aviation and you've been doing it. I think it's like 5 to 10 years. I can't remember. So it's not an initial organization you join, but it's when you reach the executive level. And there's probably, I think there's only maybe 300, 400 members. And a lot of them end up coming to this conference. And it's just a great organization to join, because I think a lot of these women started this organization in, I want to say it was the 70s, just because there weren't a lot of opportunities. There weren't a lot of mentor opportunities. And they realized that they needed to do something if they wanted to continue to compete in these aviation aerospace industries. And they've done a great job. And the talent, the women that are in this organization are just phenomenal. And so you meet a lot of connections, and you just meet a lot of inspiring people. And if there's any women out there looking for it's more aviation than I would say aerospace, but if there's anybody looking for that, I would highly recommend this organization.
Great, thanks, Jennifer. Claudine?
Oh, I'm making notes of all these organizations I'm not previously familiar with, so thank you for that. When I was an undergrad, I served as president of the National Society of Black Engineers, and that gave me amazing leadership training. I had like a membership of 100 people, a board of 20 people. So that was really so these organizations provide leadership training. I also served as the head of the Women's Impact Network at Lockheed Martin in the Palmdale location. So that being the head there, it also gave me visibility and access to executives, because they want to know how can they further the fight. What are some of the challenges that women in the organization are having? So I definitely agree. Being part of these organizations, it's not just, professional development, but it's also expanding your network and also allowing you the pipeline. Most of these organizations all want to further the pipeline of, whatever their objective is. So, so it also gives you an opportunity to pay it forward. Look at, people who are coming into the industry who who can benefit from your mentorship, etc. So that's another purpose I think some of these organizations serve. It also allows you to share recipes for success, serve as a support group, and also advocate for certain issues that are relevant to the organization. So those are some of the benefits that I think being part of organizations provide.
Yeah, I think the leadership opportunities is a really key one. I member of Society of Women Engineers since college as well, and we just had an event last night, the induction of this year's SWE president, Rachel Morford, actually works in my company, the Aerospace Corporation, and SWE as well does a lot for women in STEM careers and in engineering. So, and there's a lot of leadership opportunities, to your point, Claudine. I wanted to ask Claire, because I know that it's been, I think just in the last year or two ago, that you were inducted into the National Academy of Engineering. And I know that NAE really also focuses on bringing awareness for engineering, not just within the US, but globally as well too. And so any thoughts that you have related to either NAE or the role of professional societies in terms of bringing additional awareness to careers in aviation and aerospace?
Well, thank you. So it was definitely a nice recognition from NAE. I actually will be inducted in October. So,
okay. So it's just recent.
So I'm still very new to the organization, and I'm frequently invited to be on a panel or do this or that, and I'm still figuring out my way there. But what I one thing I want to get people to think about with respect to these organizations is, to some level, I would view them as affinity groups. And, particularly if, particularly for women in engineering, where you're often a minority, you can feel very alone, and it's getting better. I know there's a lot of women at the Aerospace Corporation, but I think it's important, particularly as, young people come in, you'll have a diversity of the workforce, and they may feel like there's not, there's no other young people around, or there's no other women young people. So there is research that says that if people can join affinity groups, it can make them bond to the organization better. So if we're worried about the pipeline and worried about women exiting the field, these affinity groups can be very important. But one event that I helped, I was with Boeing. I was executive champion for Boeing Women in Leadership. But we held an event, and it was at lunchtime. It was kind of very open forum. But what we ended up doing was dividing into kind of age groups of, like young, and the goal was to get groups of about 10 people together to share like problems. So you had the single women that were new to the company and trying to meet people. You had the young moms who had childcare frustrations. You had some of the older folks who had teenagers and teenage challenges. And then you had some other people who had elder parents. And so we got them, each group then could brainstorm and share their strategies for coping. Because, life's challenge, and this is probably a really good thing to do with COVID. You could do it virtually. But life is challenging, and being able to get people together to share ideas and solutions. Again, it could be, feeling stuck and looking for ways to get out of a current assignment and move on to something else, or should I get an MBA or whatever. But anyway, that ability to share experiences and have other people of your same age group offer solutions, as opposed to a senior person who says, from on high, oh, you should do this. But anyway, these groups kind of offer those kinds of sharing opportunities and learning from each other.
Yeah, definitely. And your point about the peer mentoring too, it isn't just senior to more junior, but that peer mentoring in terms of what people are experiencing, and knowing that you're not alone with some aspect of what you're going through is really important. So thanks, Claire. Anita, as an entrepreneur now, I'm sure that, a lot of the networking and stuff you do in terms of being an entrepreneur and for your business, what kind of professional organizations are most helpful, do you think, in this arena of aviation or aerospace? Besides AIAA, of course.
I was going to chime in on that because I've had some experience of late as part of a new proposal I'm putting in with the Air Force, where if I didn't have access to my professional network, and a lot of that coming from AIAA and the Vertical Flight Society, I wouldn't have been as successful to sort of generate the support and letters of support that you often have to put with these types of proposals. The business side of things, professional organizations allow you to have a very focused, aligned professional network with what it is that you're doing. And when you are on the entrepreneurial side, you're always in fundraising mode, whether that's applying for, a grant, applying for a government contract, or applying directly to the investment community. And it is your network that facilitate those connections. Without it, you'd really be struggling, right? You'd be a tiny little plankton in the ocean of the earth. So for me, it's actually helped me quite a bit, both AIAA and Vertical Flight Society, with fundraising over the course of the past 6 months, as well as connections to help me put in additional government proposals. And then on the other side of that, when I'm looking to hire, I also consult my network. And a lot of the people in my network, my most strong connections come from the people I've worked with over the years as part of being on a technical committee with AIAA, and the newer people that I've met in the eVTOL space. And then if you are the really young early career hire, by joining in with those networks, like it could be the Young Professional Network with AIAA, that's how you get access to these jobs, because you have people like me who are looking to hire you, and the professional organizations provide that glue to connect those different streams of people.
Great. Thanks, Anita. And then Leslie, question to you. I mean, to what extent, do you feel like the role of, museums such as the Museum of Flight and play in the public's eye in terms of, say, continuing support for the industry behind aviation and aerospace. So can you comment on how you feel that kind of contributes and the role that you play there at the museum?
That's a hard question to answer. It would probably be something more for somebody in the administration of the museum, management of the museum, than somebody like me. But, you know, if nothing else, just, you know, people come to the museum for various reasons, and many of the people that come are not particularly interested in looking at airplanes or spacecraft or whatever else we have. And so the role of a docent or another volunteer is to find something that they might find interesting. And so in some ways, it's just to promote the whole idea of aerospace to the general public. And maybe there'll be a spark there. You don't know.
Right.
But something somebody sees or a story they hear might interest them to go further. And of course, we have such a great relationship with the Boeing company, even though we're not a Boeing museum, but it's a really nice partnership that we have, and they help us a lot. I don't think we probably provide much for them, but so it's hard to know from my point of view.
Yeah, and actually, I think it's a really good point, Leslie, about you don't know, you know, what kind of a spark or seed that you planted. And so I think that's a good message for all of us, you know, whether it's we're mentoring, whether it's we're sharing information about something or some project we're working on. You know, you never know how that seed that you've planted is going to spark either in a student or in another colleague, or something you've shared has been particularly motivational. And you don't know, but you intuitively believe that some aspect of that does, you know, catch on, right? And so that likely then downstream that there are those impacts. And, you know, sometimes people do come back and then they will tell you things, and they'll be, you know, when we had the ceremony for Rachel, and she graduated from USC, actually my alma mater, and I was the SWE advisor for a while there. And she mentioned that I was the first person at Aerospace that she had met, and that's actually why she decided to come to work for Aerospace, hearing me talk about my career there. And I didn't even know that until she mentioned this, you know, and she's now been at the company 15 years, right? So you never know how just even, you know, any comment you might make might then contribute going forward. So I think that's a really good point. We have one question from Janet Grondin, who's going to be moderating our next panel after our speakers. And it's more of a looking forward kind of question. Again, not one that's necessarily easy to answer, but we're certainly interested in hearing what the panelists would think. So what do you think the aerospace industry will look like in 20 years? How would you advise a young person to prepare for this future? Would anyone like to try to answer, start with answering that question?
I'm happy to chime in.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, I am an absolute optimist here, and I think the new space sector is really taking over in terms of private investment going into a variety of companies. There's been an emphasis, I would say, on sort of new launch vehicle capabilities in the new space, but I think that's going to expand into in-space manufacturing, in-space resource mining, as well as maybe space-based power, and potentially setting up a full infrastructure in space to support colonies on the surface of the moon or even on the surface of Mars. So I think new space is going to be the thing moving forward. So any young person who's looking at getting a degree in aerospace engineering or something related to an aerospace project will have a lot of job opportunities. And it was really bad, I would say, in the 1990s, for those of us here probably remember that, but it has just taken off and I don't see it changing. So I think we had the dot-com era in the 2000s, and the 2020, 2030, 2040 timeframe is going to be new space, in my opinion.
Yeah, I know. I think you're definitely right. Anita, I'd like to ask you that question, since you're associated as a research associate professor at USC. What do you tell some of the students that you run into there about this question of what you think it'll be like in 20 years, and what advice do you give them?
Well, so I teach a graduate entry, descent, and landing class to basically teach them how to design systems to land people, or more robotic systems, but also people. So I do think that we're going to have people living on the moon very soon. And I think we're going to have the first, Mars colonies started maybe with a few people in the next 20 years. So I think I like to think about that full gamut of possibilities. And I see things going beyond launch vehicles, where I think everyone has been focused for so many years. Even my first job was on launch vehicles, into the whole variety of technologies and multidisciplinary engineering associated with being able to propel large quantities of cargo from, here to the moon or to Mars, as well as to set up operations on the surface of that. So there's just so many possibilities that almost anything you want to do in the engineering field or astrobiology will work in these, new extraterrestrial environments.
Great. Claire, I know you were several years the director for the system engineering program at Loyola, and would obviously be involved in terms of kind of, what are the needs there? And of course, I'm also in the systems engineering field as well too. So any thoughts there in terms of what you see in the future for that area, and what you maybe advised students at LMU when you were there?
Well, I don't think there's a question that the future is about more and more complex systems. So I do think having an engineering degree is a great start. Having some systems backgrounds is great as well. But whether it's going to the moon or to Mars or contested space for military aerospace, systems are just getting more and more complicated, and being able to sort that out, but at the same time trying to use open systems and leverage open systems, AI, machine learning, and automation. And so I think that the combination of more automation, more autonomy, more complicated systems means engineers should have jobs for life.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and a lot of the things that Anita mentioned, I mean, in terms of the future in space, I mean, we know just from that how, complex and how many integrated parts are going to be part of that. So you're right, it just kind of keeps increasing. And I think those, interfaces and trying to have that holistic picture, from an engineering perspective, certainly those of us that are in the system engineering field feel like that's a really valued thing, and that anyone, no matter whatever role they are, to use some of those kind of system principles and thinking principles can be very helpful. Someone had mentioned we're getting close to the end of the time. In about 5 minutes, we're going to be moving on to a couple of our short talks that are here related to education. I guess I'd like to, because someone had mentioned about this, how important it is. And I think it is true for all these, whether it's commercial space or any programs in the future that are needed for aviation or the aerospace industry, retaining individuals. And I think we sometimes see, demographics that will say that people come into the industry, they may even get a degree in engineering and then come into the industry, and then maybe they leave the industry for something else. And so I guess I'd open up to the panelists, things that you have found that you think are really important that all of us, say as leaders in this industry, need to be aware of, and maybe to help with retention, because I think we all believe that we need, full service across, again, from a diversity, equity, inclusion, people in the industry, but, maybe some thoughts that you have related to not just how you get people in the field, but then how do we retain them? So any thoughts there?
I think one of the big things is also, when we look at the incoming generation to the field, it's what is not just designing cool things, but what is the social impact? How does it help people? How does it further where we're going as a humanity? I think, always making sure that you're not only designing cool things and that you're taking on great challenges, but also, making sure that you're having a big impact socially, and furthering, the challenges that people are having in a social standpoint, I think is also important to retention. And, it's highlighted with the incoming generation into the workforce, but I think we all can benefit from that.
Yeah, definitely.
I want to foot stomp that. I don't know who has the floor.
Go ahead, Claire.
Yeah, I just wanted to foot stomp that. I think Claudine's exactly right. And I do think, oftentimes women will leave the field because engineering is a little bit too geeky, nerdy, and not impactful enough. And I sort of feel like as a manager of people that I was able to be very impactful and help people. So again, whether it's the products you design or the people you're working with or helping people get started, there's a lot of ways that, the skills that women kind of characteristically have in terms of nurturing and growing and contributing and wanting to change the world for the positive, all those things are very, very, very possible with aviation and aerospace. But I think it's underrated. So I think as we try to encourage women to go into engineering, showing that social side and the global impact is really, really important. So I think Claudine, you had a great point.
Right, and I mean, certainly if you're aware, Claire, NAE's got the Global Challenges program that they do, which kind of does address that in terms of how engineering can be used toward all these just really impactful, programs, which of course run the gamut of things. But we also have, when you look at commercial space and potentially, going to other planets, I mean, all of that can be very impactful to society, and also a lot of the systems that we have, I mean, obviously GPS being a great example in terms of, systems that really have had such and continue to have such an impact on people's lives, across the globe. So very, very good point. Any other final thoughts on this area of retention that anyone would like to weigh in? We have a couple minutes left.
I'd like to just quickly add one more point here, Marilee.
Sure.
When we talk about workforce retention, it's really very important, and it's high on the agenda for both on both the government side and also on the private sector side. Retaining skilled people in the aerospace industry. And one of the things that that's also important to focus is upskilling the current talent that we have, the current employees that we have. One of the initiatives that, for example, the Air Force has this digital university where they continuously they want their employees to be trained continuously on this on the digital aspect of things. As we know, that's a very important initiative that's going on both from the government, pushed by the DoD, as well as now with the OEMs and primes, the digital transformation journey. So that's also important to make sure the current workforce is well equipped and trained, and they are continuously being upskilled on some of these tools and practices and the new ways of doing things digitally, and being familiar with all the new technologies, new ways of doing things, and the new standards and the processes that come with it. So that's I feel it's also important part to make sure we keep providing these resources to our workforce.
Yeah, thanks, Swati. And what that raised hand was yours, the yes, or is it for Nayati? That was your raised hand?
Yes, hi.
Yes, there she
Hi,
is.
everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk, because you are so experienced and so ahead that I feel really honored to even be a part of this. But I really wanted to add on the mentorship part and retention part, especially. So I finished my master's. I worked for a little while, actually indirectly for ANSYS. And I'm currently doing my PhD, for people who don't know. And I'm also the president for Women of Aerospace for Mississippi State. There, I realized that I worked for the last year as a TN, now working as an RA. I've realized that when being a mentor is extremely helpful, because as you mentioned, that you do not know the lives you touch. and what you speak might affect somebody. So it happened that I was teaching the first one-on-one class, and there were like 155 students, and there were over 50 women in it. And after talking to them and attending classes, I think they found that it was a little harder, because I would say that they were really scared being the minority, I think. And there are way more men in it. And I think for some reason, I noticed that men had more trainings or sort of camps they had visited in their high school. So what happened is it gave them an edge over everybody else, and women did not get that. So when they started their undergrad and they were in the first year, they realized men were already answering questions, they were already ahead. So I think that made them feel that they did not belong there, because when I asked, that's what they told me. And when I was when I got elected as a president for Women of Aerospace, I realized there were so many women before before I was a part of it. For some reason, it wasn't as active, and people had left, and there were not many women doing grad school and then in the university. So being that as a minority, I think a lot of women tend to not start groups or actively participate in it. But once I started doing that, thanks to Ken and AIA, because I was a part of it before when I was working, I realized that we need women, a lot of women, to be there. So when I started actively doing this organization, we ended up having more than 30 people at the moment. So there are over 30 women, and there are 2 just men in it who are trying to help us out. And after talking to them, I realized that retention starts very early. So like all they need is a push, I think, when they're in their university phase, because only then I think they can remain in the industry and continue once they have mentors strongly rooted during the university phase. I'm not as experienced as anybody on the panel over here. I'm still working towards my doctorate, but I think once they get really confident when they're in the university and they are part of these organizations such as the AIAA and Women of Aerospace, or I was even a part of Civil Air Patrol for a very short amount of time. And I think that having that support from other women and encouragement, I think goes a really long way for the retention in the industry, I would say.
Thanks, Nayade, for that perspective. Claire, did you have a quick comment? Did I see your hand raised?
I was actually looking for the hands clapping or something, because I just wanted to completely,
okay, yeah.
I wanted to completely agree. And I think providing a little tiny bit of support when somebody's feeling vulnerable and emotional and ready to quit is just really important. And I've done a lot of research into the pipeline and why people fall out. And if people can get that support, we can keep the pipeline moving as opposed to thinning, right?
Yeah, no, very good. So reinforcing what I said. Well, we're going to have to stop on this panel because we've got lots of really great stuff coming on in the program. I want to thank the panelists. As Nayade said, just an esteemed group. I was so honored to be able to have all of you on the panel. And so I thank you for being willing to take your Saturday and share your experiences with us. And as Ken said, we did record it, so it'll be put available for folks who maybe weren't able to be with us today. So thank you all. I'm going to turn now to our next speaker. And actually, we were kind of talking about getting people into the industry and retaining people. And of course, having teachers that can teach on these subjects is very important. So our next speaker for a very short talk is going to be Miss Tanya Schroeder. She's an exhibitor for Encore and the STEM Teachers Program, and she's in the Southern California Recruitment Coordinator, who are always looking for people to be in this STEM Teachers Program. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Tanya, to talk about EnCorps. Over to you.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for having me. As you mentioned, this is kind of a great follow-up as I'm hearing information about the importance of mentorship. So I'm going to just share a little bit about Encore STEM Teachers Program and how we impact education. So Encore STEM Teachers Program is an organization that works with STEM industry professionals, and we help them transition into education, whether that is a pathway into teaching or tutoring. doing one-on-one virtual math tutoring. And our goal is to help high needs students. So we work with students in low income communities. And we work with STEM industry professionals because we know that your skill sets and your firsthand knowledge and life experience can really make an impact in the classroom. So every year, Encore tutors or fellows are impacting or working with about 35,000 students. And these are just some scores that have come back from classrooms, the students and school administrators. So we've been getting really consistent response rates of students who have an increased interest in math or science after working with a fellow. The teachers also report that the students have much more engagement. And so we've been getting really great feedback from all of the work that the fellows and tutors are doing with these students. And the reason that we're doing this is because we want to close that achievement gap. So as you can see on this spreadsheet, these are results from math scores. And as you can see, African-American students and Latino and Hispanic students are at the bottom of this chart, showing that there is still a very strong achievement gap. And so we are targeting on trying to close this achievement gap and supporting students and helping everyone achieve and succeed. So the two ways that we do this is through a teaching fellowship. So like I mentioned, we offer a pathway to becoming a full-time teacher. We work specifically with high needs schools. There is a flexible timeline, so the people who go through this fellowship can make that transition from the industry to teaching within 1 to 3 years. And we do this specifically in California, Colorado, and New York. So little by little, Encore is starting to expand to other states. And then we have a STEMx tutoring program. This is a virtual math tutoring program. It's a volunteer opportunity, and we're also working with high needs schools. And we're looking for tutors who can give 2 hours a week per semester to work one-on-one with a student. It's a flexible schedule, so the tutors are able to work with the students and their caretakers to decide what time is best for tutoring. So this could be during a lunch break, it could be on the evening, it could be on weekend mornings. And because it's virtual, it's a national program, which is really great. So I want the fellows to speak for themselves. So we have a video that will talk a little bit about what it's like for STEM industry professionals who transition into teaching. And I will play that.
I grew up in the South Bronx. Didn't have any interest in aviation or aerospace until I met my 7th grade teacher who had to be a pilot and realized like, I want to be like Rough Garden, because he flew a Cessna on the weekends. Prior to becoming a teacher, I was director of operations for the U-2 aircraft, responsible for mod, maintenance, and flight operation.
They always are surprised when I say that, oh yeah, I used to be an architect or an engineer. My daughter was in middle school when I realized that students don't like math and they don't really know math either, and it's not even their fault. So that's when I decided that, oh, I always wanted to be a teacher. I always liked teaching math. So maybe I should look into getting a career in teaching.
I've worked on some of the most amazing aircraft that's out there. That satisfaction equals the satisfaction of a student who comes into class with no awareness for aerospace engineering, but by halfway through, they are 110% engaged, and you can see them embracing that knowledge.
So I think if you just walk into an Encore classroom, into our aerospace engineering classroom with Julian Lewis, you can feel a difference. It's palpable. And I think the difference is that rich body of real world experiences help students understand, to really see their own future. And Julian brings that every day.
Oftentimes I'll walk in and I'll find him putting up pictures of past projects that he personally has worked on in his professional career, and drawing the students into what it must have been like for him to be working both in a team and on his own in the real workplace. So when I first thought, well, I'm gonna look into how I could become a teacher, I did a lot of research and I was like, yes, I don't have to do this on my own. I can have somebody help me figure out how to get a credential, help me figure out if I would be a good teacher.
Encore was very instrumental. That was the roadmap to getting me into the classroom. it's very rewarding. At the end of the day, what's going to be your legacy? What have you impacted? And as I share my experience, they are realizing that I too can do that. They will be better individuals because I'm here. And that keeps me getting up. I truly enjoy it.
All right, so that was a little bit of information on the fellowship just through the eyes of fellows, which I think is really great just to show how much it means to them as much as the impact that they make on the students. And then just to share a quick snapshot on the tutoring program. These are the students that we work with. So this provides a breakdown from an example of one of the schools that we're working with, that we're partnering with in Los Angeles. But we are working with middle school students that are in grades 6 to 8. Mostly they'll be 6th graders, and the subjects can be geometry, pre-algebra, or algebra 1. And something unique about the STEMX tutoring program is that all tutors have access to a site coordinator who works at the school. So they have direct access to curriculum from class, and to be able to share notes back and forth with the teacher. So we want to make sure that there is alignment with what's going on in the tutoring sessions and what's going on in the classroom. However, I also want to point out that because we're working with people who are bringing in their own expertise and knowledge, we don't offer any formal curriculum for the tutoring sessions. Everyone comes in with their own creativity and their own ability to be able to show what they do in their everyday life and bring that into these tutoring opportunities. So in case anyone has any questions about Encore, or you know, someone who might be interested in participating with us, there is my email address. But I was really excited to hear when I tuned in a little bit ago, all the conversation about mentorship and the importance of mentorship, because I know that this is exactly the right audience that understands the work that Encore does and the effort that we need to make in these classrooms to start that engagement at a younger age. So thank you so much for your time. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to send me an email. And thank you for allowing me to have a couple minutes here to share about Encore during your break.
Thanks, Tanya. And yes, please, you got her email address, or if she'll be here a little bit longer as we move into the next part of our program, I'm sure she'd be willing to answer some questions in the Q&A too. You know, a really great programming, you know, a lot of folks that are in the, you know, sciences and engineering then are, you know, retiring and or wanting to do something different in terms of paying it back. So I think this program is obviously something to keep spreading the information on. And if you all have, any of you have colleagues, you know, that might also be interested, to certainly share this information with them as well too. So thank you, Tanya, for being here and talking about that program. Very related to what we were talking about on the panel, definitely.
Thank you.
Next, we have a really great example of a rising star talking about students doing amazing things. We're going to next hear from Ms. Isis Ginyard. She is going to give a special presentation talking about her development of the Stella application. She is a junior at the Windward School. Couple key things you probably noted in the program: she's got a 4.0 GPA. She's president of her high school's Junior Scientist Club. She does mentoring herself to the robotics team. And so she has been working on this application that helps people working in isolated spaces cope with mental health issues, which of course is very important now, you know, for things related to the pandemic that we all have been working and coping with. So I'm going to turn it over to Isis for her presentation on the development of the Stella app. Over to you.
Hi, my name is Isis Ginyard and I'm 16 years old. This fall, I'll be a junior at Windward School. I've been working on this app since I was 13, so for about 3 years now. Since then, I've developed 5 different versions of the app I'm about to show you. This is Stella 5.0. I started working on this app while attending the Willows Community School for junior high, and I continue to update and develop the prototype because I constantly find new ways to improve it. The story of Stella begins with a problem. The problem was the lack of research being done on the mental health of people working in isolated spaces. Originally, I thought this only applied to astronauts, but I soon realized there are a lot of professions that require people to be alone for long periods of time, away from their families, living with their coworkers for months on end. These jobs include, but aren't limited to, astronauts, underwater research teams, researchers in Antarctica, and more. Even before the pandemic, I knew that not being able to leave your environment and interact with others would have a huge impact on someone. I also had a hunch that being surrounded by the same people for extended periods of time could lead to conflict. This is something we all felt this past year, and we were surrounded by loved ones. Imagine being surrounded by your coworkers 24/7 and having minimal outlets for your stress and anger. These high-stress situations can cause a person to develop mood disorders such as anxiety and depression. Although some people have a predisposition to these mood disorders, during my research, I found out that other things can trigger them as well, such as a traumatic event, a lot of stress in one's life, and prolonged feelings of loneliness. Why does this need to be solved? Well, commercial space travel is growing in popularity. One day, taking a rocket to Mars or the moon will be just as common as flying to anywhere on Earth. However, in order for this to be appealing to the general public, you're going to need to get rid of the months of training required before a mission to space. Most people won't be able to afford it, and the others just won't want to do it at all. But first, we need a way to figure out what happens to humans who are in isolated spaces for extended periods of time. This is where Stella comes in. Stella is made up of multiple components that focus on the different factors that contribute to our mental health. The first component is exercise. Exercise can be very helpful in someone's mental health journey. When you exercise, your body releases chemicals called endorphins, which trigger a positive feeling in the body. Regular exercise has been proven to reduce stress, improve sleep, boost self-esteem, and ward off anxiety and feelings of depression. So each day, a person would log the number of hours they worked out and the type of workout they did to see if it has a positive correlation to their mood. Next, we have sleep. The amount of sleep a person gets and the quality of sleep a person gets will affect their entire day. Sleep is crucial for the brain to function. By logging these things every day, we can find specific patterns in a person's behavior based on what they logged. Astronauts have to set artificial bedtimes to fall asleep, and it can be difficult for them to get good quality sleep regularly. Some signs of depression are sleeping too much or not sleeping enough. A psychiatrist would be able to look at their sleep patterns along with the emotions that they logged feeling and see if they had a serious problem. Next is diet. Diet can play an extremely important role in a person's mental health as well. Skipping meals can make a person irritable, and a lack of a nutritious diet can cause a person to have mood swings. I included a component of the app where people log how many meals they ate during the day, how many bottles of water they drank, the number of calories consumed, and the different nutritional values of the food they ate. Using this information, we can track whether a person is overeating, undereating, using food as a coping mechanism, and help them better understand how their eating habits are affected by mood or vice versa. This is the journal section of the app, where people can take notes on how they're feeling, what happened in their day, and log their emotions. At the bottom of the screen on the right-hand side, there are 6 emojis representing the following mood: happy, sad, angry, anxious, annoyed, and tired. You can pick multiple moods, and for each mood, you would rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. This is a mood intensity scale, which will help your psychiatrist find patterns in your behavior. If a person logs any emotion above a 5 for a certain number of days in a row, both the person and their psychiatrist will be notified. This is because abnormal mood swings could be a sign of a mood disorder. The notes portion of the app is a great way to monitor someone's emotions because you get an in-depth look at some of the factors that contributed to their overall mood throughout the day. Talking to anyone could be helpful in someone's mental health journey, but talking to a psychiatrist is essential because they help people develop insight into what is making them unhappy in their life. Here, a person can set up appointments with a psychiatrist in addition to the one regular appointment each week. This way, people can get more help where they see fit. Additionally, a psychiatrist would be able to look at everything a person logged in the app. This includes exercise, diet, sleep, and notes. The data collected, along with the weekly sessions with a psychiatrist, will optimize the care the person will receive because their psychiatrist will have a better understanding of their day-to-day and how they react to different situations. Abnormalities in a person's mental health will be spotted sooner, and the quality of treatment each person receives will be optimal, because Stella doesn't just rely on what is said in weekly appointments to better help the person, but it looks at the full picture. It takes into account the things that we do in between sessions, both good and bad. This is what gives every user a very personalized experience. Lastly, we have the calendar portion of the app, where it all comes together. We can look at patterns. You get to see what emotions you loved each day of the month and the intensity of those emotions. When you click on the emotions, you get a brief synopsis of the things you did that month that contributed to each mood, strategies from your psychiatrist on how to better handle situations, and recommendations on what you should continue to be doing. This way, a person can reflect on their month and see what works for them and what doesn't. Here's a demonstration of the app in action. I've been working on Stella for 3 years by myself, but now I think I'm ready for some help. My goals for this project are to continue my research with experts in different fields at companies and universities. I would also like to implement my app by testing it in different environments. Northrop Grumman has already contacted me and is interested in helping me pursue this goal and other career goals that I have in aerospace. However, if anyone here is interested in working with me on this project, contact my mom, Chantal Randolph, at chantalariana@aol.com. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Isis. As you can see in the comments, very inspirational, and the fact that you've been working on this app since you've been 13. I guess we got a few minutes here. Tell the group how it is that you got kind of interested in this area of folks that are in isolated areas, and what they might need, and then what caused you to start developing the app, and also how you came to name it Stella.
Well, while I was attending Wills Community School, I was on the robotics team, and every year we participated in First Robotics, which is a robotics competition for people of all different ages. I was in the middle school division, and the theme for the project that year was space. And so I figured that most people were going to talk about missions to Mars, because that was really popular that year, going to Mars and setting up living situations there. So I thought about, well, how would it be to be so far away from everyone you loved? I can't even imagine being in a different state, but like a different planet. That seems crazy. So I was thinking about the mental health and how it would make people feel. And I started doing research on that. And not a lot of research had been done at that point, and there's still so much that we need to figure out. So that was my question. That's how this project started. I named it Stella because on my middle school, we had to learn Latin, and Stella means star in Latin. So I thought it was a perfect fit.
Very good fit. I wondered if that was why you had named it that. Very, very creative. So yes, good continued best wishes for both your high school, and then as you decide what you're going to go on and do. What kind of things are you thinking about in terms of university, what you would like to do, or for a career? What are your thoughts on that?
I want to be a mechanical engineer because engineering is really interesting to me. and mechanical engineers get to do a little bit of everything. And I just think that's really cool.
Very cool. Yeah, and I'm sure the robotics, working with that really also cemented that interest, because they always do very cool things in robotics, both mechanical engineering as well as what you're showing with this app. You know, there's a lot of software development, obviously, in the robotics as well, too. So it's kind of a combination of things. So that's great. So again, thank you for being willing to come here, part of our program, and present. And as folks said, she gave the email of her mom. If you're interested in following up, it's great to hear Northrop Grumman is interested in continuing this. And I know they probably are very interested also in supporting you and some of your high school colleagues related to in this area as well too, because it's certainly very important for the continuation of STEM careers, which we all need. So thank you very much, Isis, for that presentation, and it will be archived and put on the AIAA website for other folks to listen to too. So continued best wishes.
Thank you.
I am going to turn it now over to another stellar aerospace professional, and I use the word stellar because she is the vice president at Stellar Solutions. Vice President of Intelligence Programs. Stellar Solutions is a women-owned business that provides high-impact engineering services to a number of very impactful programs. Ms. Janet Grondin is a AIAA senior member. She will be the moderator of our next panel. Previously to working at Stellar Solutions, she was a director at Northrop Grumman, and then before that had a very distinguished career, culminating in being a colonel for the U.S. Air Force, where she worked on a number of Air Force satellite launch and launch range systems. She's also very active in professional society. She's a former president for Women in Defense, the Greater Los Angeles chapter, of which I'm also a member of, and she is also an executive board member for the National Defense Industrial Association of the Greater Los Angeles chapter. So I'm going to turn the program over now to Janet, who's going to introduce her panel. And so over to you, Janet.
All right. Well, thank you, Marilee. I appreciate it. Boy, this has been a fantastic day. I mean, hearing from everybody and so many accomplished women on this event today. So thank you to AIAA for putting it on, and Marilee, thank you for doing a lot of the moderating here. So it's been a great day. So on this panel, I think it's the last event of the day, and we have really quite a treat for everybody. I want to I'm going to go around and introduce each of our panelists, and then we're going to hear from each one about what they're doing right now. So Dr. Aki Roberge, and Aki, Dr. Roberge, if you're here, if you would put your video on, I'd appreciate that. Dr. Roberge is a research astrophysicist in the Exoplanets and Stellar Astrophysics Lab at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. So she has a bachelor's degree in physics with a planetary science minor from MIT and a PhD from Johns Hopkins in astrophysics. So her work focuses on planet-forming disks around nearby young stars and future space observatories to observe planets around other stars. Dr. Roberge received the National Exceptional Achievement Medal for her work on the Large UV Optical Infrared Surveyor. I believe that's pronounced LUVOIR, a future space telescope aimed at searching for signs of life. So welcome, Dr. Roberge. Ms. Janelle Wellens, she is an Instrument Operations Systems Engineer at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. She has a bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering from MIT, and her work focuses on planning, generating, and validating commands to operate scientific instruments in flight, as well as monitoring their health and safety. So she's currently working multiple projects, including one that sounds really cool to me, the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, among many others. And Janelle was recently awarded the JPL Bruce Murray Award for inspiring students to engage in STEM, quenching their thirst for knowledge and sparking curiosity greater than the stars in the sky. So welcome, Janelle. Glad to have you here today. Ms. Marilyn McPolin, she's the Director of Events at Cal State University, Dominguez Hills. She has 20 years in aviation, including producing a wide variety of never been done before events like the X Prize and multiple air shows. So she's currently working on over 60 events and creating a documentary of the Dominguez Hills 1910 Air Meet, which I hope we hear more about in the future. And she has had the good fortune of piloting the only two-place British Supermarine Spitfire Mk9 in the world, in the US. She's worked with Bob Hoover, Donald Douglas Jr., airshow performers Sean D. Tucker, Wayne Handley, and astronauts Buzz Aldrin, Gene Cernan, Tuskegee Airmen, WASP, and members of the Flying Tigers. So can't wait to hear about what Marilyn's been doing. She's got quite a experience base there. We also heard from Niyati earlier, Niyati Chakshi. She's a PhD candidate at the Bagley College of Engineering at Mississippi State University. She has a master's degree in aerospace, aeronautical, and astronautical engineering from Cal State Long Beach. She's a project manager with experience in computational fluid dynamics, and she has participated in a rocket competition among many other things. So really excited to hear from Niyati about what she's doing in her doctoral work. And Ms. Kathleen Fredette, she's the Director of STEAM Initiatives for the iLead California Charter Schools. She has a master's degree in STEM education and more than 10 years teaching STEM, teaching gifted math and science, as well as remedial math. She's flown on 4 NASA SOFIA missions, and that's including one with astronaut John Grunsfeld. So she is a NASA Endeavor Leadership Distinction Award recipient and a certified glider pilot. She's been married for over 30 years. She has 4 sons and a multitude of hobbies that include soaring, reading, scuba, classical piano, and many other things. So looking forward to hearing Kathleen's comments on how she integrates all that together. And finally, Ms. Laura Duffy, Space Systems Engineer for Canyon Consulting and PhD student at Colorado State University. She has a master's degree in astronautical engineering with research on orbital resonances. As a consultant, she performs modeling and simulation, ground systems development, and mission design for advanced position, navigation, and timing satellite called NTS-3. Laura is an Air Force veteran. She has experience with global positioning system and space battle management and control. And her efforts led to the successful launch of the first GPS-3 satellite on a Falcon 9 in December of 2018. So welcome, Laura. Just really happy to have you here, and can't wait to hear more about orbital resonance. So as you can see, quite a distinguished panel this afternoon. And I guess I'd like to start out with, you know, kind of a quick question to kick things off, and please put your questions in the chat. But before we get to audience questions, I want to kick things off and have you each tell us about your job, your day-to-day, you know, what's important to you. Like to know, you know, are you in your dream job? If not, you know, what is your dream job? What do you want to do? So Kathleen, I think we'll start with you.
Okay, thank you. I'm always amazed that I get to be part of a group like this, because I look at all the talent and skills and I think, wow, how did I land here? So I am in a dream job. I think I may have the best job in the world because I get to I get to work with young people. I get to work with educators in an organization where we use project-based learning and social emotional learning as the educational delivery system. So before that was cool, we were doing it. And I was an educator for quite a long time, and so got all those beautiful skills and then moved into this position. And what do? Well, as the director of STEAM initiatives, I have a couple roles. Probably the most fun one is that I get to create 6 to 8 week long projects. And since my focus is aerospace, we create these beautiful opportunities for kids to learn the standards that they have to learn in their subject matters, and we're K-12. So these projects morph depending on the kids, and the kids have opportunities to do real stuff. So we talked a lot about today, like, how did we get here? And often I heard stories about, well, my dad or my grandpa, or there was connections. A lot of times right now, kids don't have that, especially the ones that I work with in Southern California, especially kids that come from lower social and economic situations. So giving a kid an opportunity to learn about a glider and to actually work on a simulator and then go fly a glider as part of understanding physics. So that's the sort of stuff I get to do, space and aviation, because that's where I landed. I also get to coach facilitators, or we call them teachers. So that really fills my heart, because at the age that I am, or the place I am in my life, what I really want to do is have an eye to legacy. So what are the kids that I'm pouring into? What are the other teachers that I'm pouring into? Because I'm moving towards that time in my life where I probably won't be doing this full time. So I love what I do because it keeps me growing. I'm usually the person in the room with respect to stuff we do, like when we send experiments to space, I have to learn so much to be able to do that. So it's the best of all worlds for me in the education arena. And I love that I get to work with people who are doing the real deal stuff and connect the kids and connect the teachers. So thanks for letting me be here.
That's fantastic, Kathleen. Thank you. It sounds exciting. I want to just jump in your classroom right now. It sounds like fun. We're still, Dr. Rouge is on her way. And so we're going to go straight to Janelle. Janelle, can you tell us a little bit about what you do, and are you in your dream job? And if not, can you tell us what that is?
Sure. I mean, the dream job question is so interesting because when I thought about it, I had the dream company. When I was at MIT, I kept hearing about this magical JPL place that I had never heard of before. Oh, we're going to land something on Mars like JPL. We're going to send a satellite to Saturn like JPL. And I started to realize this JPL place might be like the real deal. But I never actually landed the internship at JPL. So when I accepted the full-time offer, that was my first time. And I was ready to sign that line as soon as I could. It didn't matter where they placed me. I was just excited to be there, that they gave me a chance. And that's when I learned that my job title was going to be Instrument Operations Engineer. And to be brutally honest, had no idea what in the world that meant. What is an instrument operations engineer? But I quickly was trained, surrounded by a great team that let me learn that I have one of the coolest jobs you could ever have in the world of space, because it's my job to work with scientists to actually operate the instruments that we put on our spacecraft. I like to think of it like the spacecraft and the instruments. The spacecraft's like your vehicle. It gets you to the place that you want to go, that you want to learn more about. And then these scientific instruments are the ideas. It's the scientists asking the how, the what, the why, and we build these instruments to answer those questions. And so I work with them to build commands here on Earth, on the ground, the ones and zeros that the instruments are going to understand to carry out those and execute those commands, so that we get in return this amazing science data that comes in all shapes and forms. So that's my job in a nutshell, and it most certainly has become my dream job for sure.
Well, fantastic. Thank you, Janelle. I have a million questions I want to ask you right now. And so we're going to come back to you for sure, because that's really exciting. Okay, so Marilyn, can you talk to us about what you do and whether or not you're in your dream job?
Yes, thank you, Janet. And thank you for hosting this exciting panel. Kind of like Janelle, I had to stop and think about that. I've been blessed. I've had so many dream jobs. And each one that I've taken on, I didn't know that it was going to be a dream job until I got into it. So I was just incredibly fortunate. I was director of marketing for a naval air station, which was my transition into aviation. Eventually down the line, I produced air shows, some very high level ones, you know, Blue Angels, that kind of stuff. And I became a director, one of the directors at the Museum of Flying in Santa Monica, California. I'm going to guess there's people who aren't in California, aren't familiar with that. From there, I made a couple of transitions and then ended up at the X Prize. And so that was fantastic. I was a senior director of operations there and learned all about rockets, which I had no knowledge of at the time. And I was overseeing a team of aerospace engineers that had graduated from like MIT and Harvard, not too intimidating. And then, you know, somewhere along the line, I made a couple of other transitions, and now I'm in higher education. And I never expected that I would land here. But I'm an administrator. And some of the things that it has allowed me to do in being in this is sort of taking my broad-based background in all the different areas that I've been involved with. And one of the areas, and Janet, you touched on in my bio, that I'm sort of involved is being able to channel my creative energy and helping facilitate and further a documentary on the 1910 Air Meet. And the reason why that's so unique is the 1910 Air Meet obviously was the first air meet in the United States, but it took place on the grounds of the university that I work at in Carson, California. So my knowledge of early aviation is not extensive in any way, shape, or form, but what I bring to the table is throughout my broad-based experience, I know a whole lot of people. And so I've been able to facilitate conversations with people and organizations that they were having trouble connecting with in producing this documentary. So that's just one of a small part, but, you know, similar to what Kathleen said, you know, I enjoy the process of being able to basically, you know, educate a bunch of brilliant brains and sending them out into the workforce. And I don't really come in contact with students a whole lot, but being able to see this process and in some ways being able to have the conversation as, well, why aren't we doing this as a university? You know, why aren't we having this curriculum? Not being an educator, sometimes I can see things differently than people who are educators on the inside. But anyway, in a nutshell, that's my experience. And I'm honored to be here with all of the other women professionals today. Thank you.
And I'm just going to pop in and say, last year when we met, I got to meet Marilyn last year, and she said, hey, if you ever need anything, don't ever ask me that question. And so Marilyn sat on our assessor panel to choose the from this year's mission, where kids learn about microgravity, why does an astronaut float? They learn about experiment design, and then they develop an experiment that could be sent in a little mixed dip tube that NanoRacks creates. And then we send those up. And Marilyn sat on our assessor panel and helped us select the next 2 experiments that are going up on SpaceX, 25. So it's so great to see you again, Marilyn.
It's great to see you, and I thoroughly enjoyed the process. It was so much fun, and I learned from your students. So that was so much fun.
That's awesome. And it ties back to, you know, I heard Claire say it a number of times and other people about networking. You know, I mean, it's all about connecting people, and look how much more you can get done just by connecting to people. So that's a great real-time example today. So, all right. So thank you, Marilyn. Niati, would you tell us a little bit about what you're doing? I know you probably, I don't know if being a PhD student is your dream job forever. That would be pretty hard. Can you tell us about what you've done and what your dream job is?
Yes, ma'am. My dream job is actually to be an astronaut, and I have done a few hours of my pilot training, but I couldn't do a lot of them because I was doing my master's back then. It was a little hard to get into and save up for that. But then after I graduated with my master's, I was working for a company called ANSYS, and it was doing fluid flow analysis because I really enjoy computational fluid dynamics, aerodynamics, hydrodynamics. So my current research is also based a lot on that, and parallel computing, using parallel computing to make computational fluid codes faster. And I'm currently working on that. And I'm hoping to one day go and work for NASA. And I know there are so many companies coming up. And these days, I know there's SpaceX, there's Blue Origin, and everybody's trying to go to space, but I think I'm the traditional person and I really want to work. As she said, you know, everybody talks about JPL does this, JPL does that. So yes, that's one of my dream jobs. I'm also currently enjoying being the president for Women of Aerospace in my university. And I get to learn so much every day from them. They are just, I feel like I finished my undergrad a long time ago now, because all the undergrad students are so much more advanced in so many things. I already think about that every day, and I'm really glad that I got this opportunity to be here.
Well, fantastic. We're thrilled to have you. And I think out of this panel, you've already been connected with 2 or 3 people who can help you with your NASA goals. So that's excellent. All right. So Laura, would you like to tell us a little bit about what you do and your dream job as well?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I'm honored to be part of this panel. It's funny, as an early professional, you're usually on the listening end, so it's nice to be invited to speak as well and share my perspective. Hopefully I have something to share that you all can gain from. So I'm a space systems engineer working for a consulting company. We consult for the Air Force Research Laboratories right now, and I'm the main orbits person on the program, and I love orbits. I think they're just so beautiful how things move in space, and the fact that I get to be the head of orbits for this program is so cool. So yes, it is my dream job right now. The other advantage I want to talk about with my job is, as a consulting company, I have a lot of flexibility with what I do, and we have the ability to pick up contracts all the time. My job is just like, space systems engineer is a very broad title, and I take full advantage of that in my tasking.
Well, excellent. Well, I have to admit that in order to introduce you, I had to look up what orbital resonance was. And so I was pretty impressed on what you've done your research on, Laura. So welcome. Looks like we don't have Dr. Roberge at the moment, so hopefully she'll be able to join us. Hopefully everything's okay, but because I know she was excited about being here, but life happens, so maybe something's going on. Hopefully everything's all right. So we'll go ahead and press with the panel. I haven't seen any questions yet from the audience, and if I missed something, let me know. But you know, I would like to maybe kind of go through the panel one more time with another broad question. You know, we've talked today on other panels about you know, challenges and overcoming challenges. I heard a lot of great advice from many people about, you know, moving on and, you know, not getting stuck and that kind of thing. But so I want to maybe along that theme, you know, what challenges have you encountered? And I think we'll start with Laura, but what challenges have you encountered and overcome in your career, early in your career? And then what advice would you have for young people that are really trying to start their journey? Because obviously everybody's going to be looking at challenges in their career, but you know, what would you tell a young person?
So the biggest challenge that comes to mind so far in my career was my first assignment after graduate school in the Air Force. I was put in a position that you would, based on the type of taskings that were coming in, you would call it an administrative assistant type role, which didn't seem right considering the Air Force had just invested in my undergraduate and graduate degrees in astronautical engineering. I'm not sure whether it was my age that placed me in that role or what about it, but I just kept doing my best to, first of all, get done what needed to get done in that role, and second of all, apply what I had learned from a technical standpoint to try to take it a step further and maybe even get some of the engineering tasks done. So like to prove myself, like, hey, I'm not an administrative assistant. That's not what I went to school for. My efforts were noticed, fortunately, and I got picked up to work on a higher priority program and be an engineer on that program. So my advice for that challenge is just don't let others limit you.
That's great advice, Laura. And I think you're not alone in that. Particularly, I think, young people that come into the Air Force, they do find themselves in that position. So it's great advice. Kathleen, I'd like to go to you. Can you address a challenge in your early career and how you, and what kind of advice you would have for young people?
Yeah, it's not early career because I had so many, but when I moved into education and then specifically into aerospace, when I was selected to fly on Sophia, I was teaching 7th grade math and science, and everyone else on the first 6 that were selected, and we helped develop that education program, they were physics, astronomy, they'd been on other missions. I was new, really new. And I had to just hold on to my own sense of lack, that I didn't have the knowledge, that I didn't have what they had, which it seemed like a whole bunch more acumen than I did. So all along the way, and at one point, the mission manager said, I don't want to hear one more time that you're only a 7th grade educator, because it turned out that I became a high-level spokesperson accidentally, but not really, because that's my gift, is a communicator. I can take really difficult concepts, pull it out of an engineer, mathematician, or scientist, and then bring them down to a place where everyone else can understand, because I don't have that knowledge. So that was a really good piece of information for me, so that now when I'm working with people that are highly educated or famous or have done big things, I'm like, that's okay, because I'm here and I'm going to learn. And then what's my goal is, how can I make a connection, or how can I connect this to young people or bring it to someone else? So I think being okay with who you are, and then really defining what your skills are and bringing that with a lot of confidence, and then continuing to do the work to keep on doing that better. Because the jostling that happens on social media, and then I'll stop, the jostling that happens to like be good enough, well enough, it's just constant right now. So I cut up social media last October, actually, because of this one of this very things. So that's my biggest challenge I've overcome. Helped me to become a pilot.
Yeah, I think that's such a great story, and it's something important, I think, for everybody. It's a little bit of a theme between you and Laura, that, kind of trying to find your value when you come into the business. It's not immediate all the time. And so persevering through that, figuring out what your value is and being comfortable with that, that's a great message. So thank you for that. Okay, let's see. Janelle, can you talk a little bit about, have you had any challenges? I bet you might have a couple.
Oh, yes. Definitely not without challenges over here. Yeah. When I was thinking about the question, what kind of came to my mind first was this concept of finding your place, and in all senses of what that means. And so, it started very early for me. I get accepted into this school called MIT that I only learned about through a pamphlet in the mail that my mom happened to bring my attention to. And I find myself there, and I realize, I don't know nearly as much as my classmates. My classmates came in knowing exactly what they wanted to major in. They knew who the professors were. They had a plan for themselves. And I was like, whoa, just happy to be here. And so when I started to feel the magic after getting into this aerospace engineering stuff, I started to wonder, how do I end up finding the dream job? How do I accomplish those things? Where do you even start? Especially when you're surrounded by all of this greatness, and when you compare it to yourself, you're like, oh man, I got an uphill battle. But what I really found to be like the #1 driver for me, and what I think is the reason why my time at MIT still was successful, despite those feelings of imposter syndrome and not thinking that you have necessarily the tools or the right to call yourself an engineer, is this concept called the delta, a math term. I've always loved math. I'm a math geek. But I think of it like all of us have something called the personal delta. It is the difference between the us that started and the us of now. And when I think and I thought about that personal delta, I wasn't nearly as hard on myself anymore. Compare the Janelle who walked in, knew nothing, to the Janelle of today, even after I didn't get the internship at JPL. Not just the first time, but I didn't get it the second time. And then the third time, it wasn't even an option, you know? But when I kept leaning on that delta and focusing on how can the personal growth happen, that is when things really clicked for me. And I attribute that to the reason why I still ended up at JPL despite all of those shortcomings. And then when I got there, I had to find my place all over again. And it's not just in the technical realm. You have to find your place as a person too. I moved from the East Coast to California, a place I had been maybe 3 times in my entire life, no family here. You know, I walk into work. Thankfully, my team was incredible. You'll hear about them. The Cassini mission, oh my goodness. So grateful to have been a part of that mission as my first project there. But I felt this longing of community. And when I poked out and explored, I found that JPL had employee resource groups, but the one for Black employees had really been dormant. They were doing basically one event a year. And so I met with them and said, would you mind if me and my friends kind of put some life back into this again? And they were all on board for that. And now, you know, 5 years later, I'm the president of the Black Employee Resource Group at JPL. And we have gone above and beyond doing our one MLK Day event. Not only have we gathered the community, but we have made institutional change at the lab as a driving force. I'm so happy that, you know, if you persevere and just think about the growth, you really can eventually find your place.
That's such a great message, Janelle. Thank you so much. I mean, and congratulations on, you know, taking that dormant, you know, group and making something out of it, you know, because how many more people now are going to not have to go through what you did, and they're going to find their place when they walk in, as opposed to trying to figure it all out. So
that was the goal.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you. So Marilyn, can you talk a little bit about your experiences?
Yes, thank you. You know, I'm going to sort of echo a little bit about what Janelle said about, you know, really, you know, being perseverance and creative problem solving, and not necessarily accepting the word no every time you hear it. I've had, you know, most of my career, particularly related to aviation and aerospace, has been a lot of no's dealing with the FAA. You know, when I wanted to do an over-the-water air show, and not only over-the-water air show, which is a very high degree of difficulty, but also doing it in Class Bravo, Charlie, and Delta airspace. This is when I decided to create my own air show in Huntington Beach. And of course, you have Long Beach, Los Angeles, and Orange County there. And everybody kept telling me it was impossible. And I'm like, whoa, is it impossible or just difficult? I can do difficult. So I'm not quite sure where you draw the line between impossible and difficult. You know, I'm figuring that out, but I went through a lot of no's in getting that done, a lot of no's. And I'm going to share one quick story related to that, which I think was a really big, it was a huge aha moment for me. So I was well into the planning of this air show, probably 6, 7, 8 months into the planning, about 45 days away. It was going to be a 3-day air show, full blown, you know, the Royal Canadian Air Force. They had Bob Hoover flying, a bunch of civilian air show performers, fairly well known at that time. It also had a lot of activities. There were going to be musical concerts. There was a car show. There was an art show. There was a huge, gigantic trade expo, you know, for more than about 400 or 500 businesses. It was a huge, gigantic event. So I'm saying this because throughout this process, I had gone to the city council and they had given their approval. So again, I'm about 45 days out, and all of a sudden I received notification from the city of the Huntington Beach that the event permit had been revoked. And I'm like, why? And they said, well, the fire marshal doesn't think that this is a good thing for the city, that it's kind of a risky move. I didn't even know a fire marshal existed in the city of Huntington Beach at that time. The man didn't know the position existed. So upon some investigation, I quickly found out that he was sort of like the person that no one's ever going to say no to or stand up to, because he protects the city. And he was worried about the safety and well-being of the residents. And even though I had worked with all the city safety services, he still didn't feel. So I kept saying, well, how can I get a meeting with this person? Like, I've never met him. We don't even know each other. And everybody said, that's not going to happen. But I kept saying, no, it is going to happen. And I finally found an individual who was well connected. And she set up a meeting with me and the fire marshal. And I had 2 weeks to prepare. And I sat down and I thought about what that conversation was going to look like. And I realized that, his revoking that permit without ever knowing anything about this was coming from a place of fear. He was concerned about the safety and well-being of his residents. And so I had to overcome that fear. So what I did is I sat down and I thought, well, how can I do this? And I realized that there were quite a few very large other air shows that were put on by cities, actually owned by the cities, including Chicago Sea and Air Show, which was over the water, Toronto Sea and Air Show, which was over the water, St. Louis, Minnesota, that was an over the water air show. And then of course the Seattle Sea Fair. I reached out to every single one of those cities and said, I need your help. I am trying to do X, Y, and Z, and the city is saying no. And so they sent me, all of them sent me their disaster preparedness plans. And again, they owned their air show. The city funded their show because they deemed it a good community service, whatever it might be. So they believed in it. Not only did they give me their disaster preparedness plans, but they offered to be on call during the time when I had the meeting with the fire marshal. Suffice it to say, wow. 30 minutes after the meeting with the fire marshal, my air vent was back on. And so, wow.
What a story. Yeah.
And I just have one other quick one, just kind of that it brought to mind, kind of, I'd already been through those challenges. So years later, when I transitioned to the X Prize, and one of the missions in my job description, I don't know if it was a brand new position, so I'm not sure it was a job description, but I was overseeing the first Air and Space Expo at Holloman Air Force Base, where we were going to have live rocket fire and air show performers, and also lunar lander vehicle competition that Northrop Grumman was sponsoring for $2.5 million. So my job was one of the jobs was to get the AST, which is the space side of the FAA, to buy off on the fact that I wanted to fly experimental vehicles, lunar landers, filled with liquid oxygen in front of a crowd. And they looked at me and went, yeah, no, it's not going to happen. Not today, not ever. Well, suffice to say, it did happen. It took many months again of overcoming what is the fear, where's the mark that we can move closer so that we're both in our comfort zones. But anyway, so those are some of the areas that, I was faced with a lot of no's, and you just had to figure out, well, what does no really mean? And usually it's fear-based or not understanding something. And the more you can educate them or come to a common ground as to what is it that you're not feeling comfortable with, and being able to overcome those obstacles, somewhere along the line, you're going to find that middle road.
Those are great stories. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Marilyn. Okay, Niati, can you give us a little bit of an idea of what your world is like in terms of challenges?
I'll be honored to. So I think one of the biggest challenges I had was after I graduated with my master's, when I was working. As Stephen, I've already shared, you get the job, what is the position, you started, but you don't know what you have to do there. So you kind of have an idea, but you don't know where to start, what should you be doing, and how to ask for help, or whether or not to even ask for help. Are you supposed to do that? Specifically because all the people were males, and it's really hard for me to go and ask them. So I learned from that I used to pick up way more I had to prove myself that I do belong there. I would take way too much on my plate and get overwhelmed and work late hours. And I do not know if it's needed, or any other male people I know in the industry would do that, but I would pick up way too much work, and I would agree to everything. I would say yes, and I would pick up everything. And as a result, I'm working late in the night, late alone in the office, trying to figure out why I idea. Should I have the liberty to say no or ask for it or negotiate, or even if it's in the terms, because you're new in the industry, you do not know whether you can do that or not. So I think that was a very big challenge for me to understand that I can say no to things, and I should go and ask for help that would not be taken otherwise, because I think since as women, we always have to prove ourselves, which is very right. We constantly have to keep proving, I would say, in the work industry that we belong there, we deserve to be there. And I think that is a feeling we need to get rid of, because no matter what, how much you work 3 times, 4 times, it still comes back to the same thing, that the next day with the new project, you're still working really hard to show everybody. So I think being happy with where you are at, as everybody's told, is a really important thing to realize, and to ask for help and mentors. I think when needed is really, really big, and learning to say no, because as I think females, we have learned to say yes as generational, like one is, I wouldn't say as, it's not anything with ego, but the need to be happy, the need to please everybody, the need to be popular with everyone, and to prove yourself constantly, because that's what you had to do every time, because there were so many classes I would take and I'd be the only woman, and I think you all can relate to that. So you constantly have to prove your place in the industry. And I think at one point I realized that I have to start proving people, because I belong there. The reason I am there is because I already belong there. I do not have to further take on 10 times more work than somebody else to prove it that I can do it. And I think that was a very big challenge for me, because it took me a long time it's an inner battle, I think we all face. Nobody talks about it. I was not able to discuss it with any other female because there were no other females. And that's when I realized maybe I should start again, get back in AIAA, and maybe that will help me connect with other women or other people, even men who have seen this in the industry. And I think that helped me a lot to open up and figure out that I do not know. And I wouldn't say I know unless I don't know about it. But I think because I was willing to put in way more effort to learn it, I would get way more work, which wasn't a problem. But I think with the constant battle, we need to understand that if we are there at the job, we got the job, we deserve it. That's it. We do our work, and that goes on from there. We do not have to feel all the time that we don't belong here. I don't know why am I here, because I think I had that just for this panel discussion too. I was feeling that way because I was like, I do not know. There's so many women who are so experienced. You all have done such great things, and I do not know if I really do belong here. But as everybody said, we just have to be more confident in ourselves and believe more in ourselves than anybody else.
That's a great message.
So I'm saying that's the big, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great message. I love that you can say no. I love the message of, you belong, and so that, and I heard it earlier in the program, somebody said, supporting each other. I think it might've been Claire, probably Marilee and a couple others, but, supporting each other so that you do feel more like you don't have to you're not the only person telling yourself, hey, I belong, when you have other folks that can help you, feel that way.
Janet, can I say
Yeah,
something
like,
about?
Yeah,
Oh,
please.
sorry,
okay.
Anita. You go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it also has to do probably being a woman, but also folks who have a high bar of excellence or are turned on by achievement, turned on. We're like, I love personal development, and I love growing and developing, and I love trying new things. And I, about 1.5 years ago, no, it's almost 2 years now, I crashed because I was running a project that was a high-level aerospace project connected to kids in Israel. And it was connected to NASA Ames. I was running the glider project, all these different, and I was opening up a school in Colorado that's right on an airstrip. It's on Centennial Airstrip, and it's an aerospace school that's connected to Wings Over the Rockies, Centennial Airport, and is specifically aerospace middle school. And I landed on my butt because I kept saying, oh, I'm good, I'm working out, I'm eating well, but I really, really did burn out. And my point to that is, there's a certain amount of energy and time we have to invest in things. And so I'm so much more careful now, and I'm in a weekly mastermind meeting with some really amazing women. And I meet with them faithfully for, accountability, support, goal setting. And that's just been really helpful for me, because I can lie to myself. I can say, oh, I can do that next opportunity because, ooh, I don't want it to go away. And I can justify as a high achiever. And so I really glad you did that. You're hearing that about yourself and that you're owning that, because you have a lot to do and a lot that's before you, and learning that lesson now and not ending up on your A is really the right way to go. So.
Thank you, Kathleen. I would just like to say something else too. So when I was doing my master's, I was part, as you mentioned, was part of a rocket team. So even there, they were just, all I would see were all the males. So as Kathleen said, taking on way more projects did lead to me crashing at one time, and I was like, I don't think I can do anything anymore. So when I came back to school after working, I was like, I'm going to go do a full-time PhD. I think I realized what I didn't have was other people who were in the same scenario but weren't ready to talk about it. So that's when I decided that, no, I do want to revive the women of aerospace, and I do want to be a part of it, because I think I didn't get it. And I think a lot of other students might be in the same position. And it turned out, yes, they are, because they're scared, they're working hard, and a lot of them were ready to drop out because they were like, I'm going to just change my major because I don't want to be this way. And I think, as she said, learning it ahead in time is really helpful. Yeah.
Thanks everybody. And one thing, Kathleen, that you brought up, I think is really important. I'm part of several different groups, Women in Defense, and I've got other groups of friends that are, basically professionally based, but that really does help with the accountability, because you're right, we all can lie to ourselves about how much we can take on. And every once in a while I'll realize, oh, I keep missing this. I keep missing this meeting. I keep missing this time with my professional friends. And it's like, okay, that's my own trigger to go, hey, your priorities are out of whack. So those kinds of things, if you can join them, like, Janelle, your Black Excellence group, and, there's all those different kinds of things that you can join, but it does help you keep balanced and focused and realize, yeah, there's a lot out there, but but you can't do it all, and you probably shouldn't do it all. So okay, so I'm going to go on to the next question. So I would like to know from each one of you what your most memorable experience at work was, and what did you learn from it? So Nyati, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, I would say the most memorable was actually, I wouldn't say it was from my work, it was the rocket launch experience I had. It was my first experience. We had a solid propellant rocket. It was taller than me. So I was like, I don't know if we'll go as it goes. So we drove to Green River, Utah, and I think it was Ezra I was a part of, and everybody came over internationally. And I was like, how big can this be? Because I had no idea. And I go there and I realized it's massive, and there's so many people there. And I was thinking to myself, if I'm able to just stand there, it will be a great deal for me. So we launch a rocket. So everybody's launching solid propellant rockets. And I'm like, I'm so amazed. And then comes liquid propellant rockets. And that is a whole another ball game. So when the first or the second time I saw them launch, and I was like, this has changed my life, because I'm standing right there and I'm listening to the propellant burn and lift off, because I have never had the experience to see a rocket launch in person before. So I think that was the most amazing moment, which reaffirmed my faith in what I was doing. And I was like, this is what I want to hear, and this is what I want to do. I want to hear this is every day, and I'm hoping I get to hear it whenever I get a full-time job. And I think after I do my PhD, but I think I do every time I go back to that memory, and it just makes me come back to it this is why I'm in it, because that's the rush which I get, and I really want to keep doing it. And I think that's the most memorable experience, to be standing just so far away. And it was a very different experience, because a rocket launch could turn into something really very unsafe, which it was a couple of times, because it was in the desert in Green River, and everybody just started running and start walking, and they're like running for their life. But it was scary, but it was a really good memory I had. And I think that will last with me forever. So that was really a great one. Yes, thank you.
Oh yeah, I think we can all who've seen a rocket launch can relate to that. So thank you for sharing that, Nyati. Laura, would you share with us your most memorable experience at work and what you learned?
Yeah, so it's funny because if you had told me at the beginning of this experience that it would be my most memorable, I would have been very skeptical of you. So I had the opportunity to design, build, test, and deploy a space ground system, which normally I prefer the space segment versus the ground segment, but you know, like any opportunity that comes in, we give our best. So I gave my best, and I got to be part of a small team of very intelligent, very professional engineers. And because it was a small team, we were each so critical to the mission. Like, we just had to do our job, and we had to do it right, and we had to do it right on time. And the really cool part about this experience was I got to see it from beginning to end. Like, I got to do all the paperwork and the engineering design work up front, and then fly to the location and actually turn wrenches and get this system up and running. So just so cool. And I'll never forget that experience. The thing I learned from it is that small teams can do great things. Absolutely.
And you forgot the part about and ground rocks, right?
Yeah. You gotta have a good system.
That's right. I had to throw that in there. I'm a ground person, so I was at the, you gotta stand up and represent. But no, that's cool. And I do actually think on the ground is one of those places where you really can turn the wrench, so to speak. And so that's cool that you had that experience. Before we go though, I'm going to ask you about orbital resonances. So we'll come back to that. No, we're not going to stop before I hear more about that. Okay, let's see. Kathleen, can you talk about your most memorable experience?
This is a hard one. With work, I get these bucket-filled moments where parents or kids or teachers look at me and say, this has changed my life. And, and you get to hear that and you think, that's why I do this. I think of the moment when we looked at the oxidation. I took some kids to to NASA Glenn to do post-flight analysis on our first experiment, then What Up, and then watching the rust come on the electron microscope, and it looked like something alive. And the boys that were there, that were high school boys, were like almost weeping. Those kind of moments when I watched a kid solo for the first time in a glider, and there was a high school student, or get their license in the high school and know that that genesis of that seed was, those are like those moments. But here's mine. Selfish mind. Here's me. Aww. That's me shaking hands with an examiner when, I'm up in the glider. I never wanted to be a pilot, never, ever in a million years, because I didn't want to, and I wasn't interested, but we were doing this project, and I said to my husband, who was a glider pilot, he said, hey, your kids need to know about how to speed up, how to turn. And I'm great. Go make that video for me, husband, because he's also an educator. And he goes, no, you're the teacher. You have to. And I said, no, I don't want to get in that glider. And so I got in the glider and made those videos. And then after a couple moments, I started flying. Couple flights, I started trying to fly. So learning to fly a glider was the hardest thing I've ever done, next to raising 4 kids. And I was, I did it because I loved it, but also I knew that if I could do it, and if I could overcome my fear, then I could also share this with any of the folks that I was working with. So it was a personal, beautiful moment of education about my capacity to do anything. And I truly, when that glider landed and I didn't know it was coming, and he said, "Congratulations, you're a private pilot." Like I started weeping because it was such a moment of like, how in the world did that, okay. So that spoke to me about, if you want to do anything, and I know it's so cliche, you really could do anything you want to. So that's my educational moment that I share often with kids and with young people in general. So that's it.
That's awesome. That's so awesome. I mean, yeah, I can't relate to that because I can't imagine not wanting to be a pilot and then all of a sudden you're just like, boom, you're it, but what a great story for your classroom too, to just inspire kids to do what they can do. So thank you for that, Kathleen. All right, Janelle, can you talk about your most memorable experience? You must have had a couple with missions you're working.
Sure, and I love hearing all of you talk about your memorable experiences because you can just feel it, right? I could feel your excitement. I could feel that moment. Oh, it's just so special. It brings the goosebumps back when you think back on stuff like that. Okay, so I guess talk about my most memorable moment. It happened when I first started at JPL, and I was told that I was going to be working on the Cassini mission to Saturn. I knew nothing about this mission prior, but of course I'm not going to say that. I mean, yeah, I know Cassini. Let me do research when I go home. But when I started to really learn and understand what this project was all about, I started to realize how special and how grateful I should be of this opportunity that was given to me. I was the last hire to the Cassini mission because it was at the end of its life by the time I got brought on. And I stopped being as hard on myself about not knowing as much about it in advance when I learned that it launched in 1997 when I was 3 years old. But somehow, some way, all these years later, I'm still able to be a part of this magical thing. But here's what truly made Cassini special. In its years in space, after its 7-year journey from Earth to Saturn, being there, extending its mission over and over again because of the extremely smart and creative navigation team, it had come to show us, and when I say us, I mean all of humanity, because one of the best parts at working at JPL is that we share the wealth. Don't just keep it on the inside, we share it with the public. Join us in the discovery. And it had taken these magnificent photos of Saturn and its rings and the moons. I have one of the pictures signed by the whole team hanging on my wall. I wish I could show you right now. But it was so exciting to be told that my job was operating the cameras, taking these pictures, unreal, these things that look like an artist drew them, but we were actually there. Humanity was there taking this data. And when I heard from the team that we were about to do this thing called the grand finale, I was like, what is this? We're going to be diving in between the gap between Saturn and its rings for the first time ever, and then ending on one last orbit where we point it back to Earth, sending our last signal and disintegrating in its atmosphere. We were planning the end on purpose. I mean, how cool is that? As a new hire, I'm like, what? We're ending it on purpose and I get to be there for it. I mean, it's so awesome. I was looking forward to it. What a cool experience. But as we got closer to the date, I started to get this sense that the rest of the team wasn't necessarily as excited as I was. I mean, I'm listening to them. They're talking about, they're going to have to bring out the therapy dogs and the ice cream trucks. Like, why do we need that? Are we supposed to say having a party? But then on September 15th at 4 in the morning, it's out there at Caltech. It's dark. I'm surrounded by members of people who have worked on Cassini through the years, 30 years or so of its being in existence, being thought of, being designed. And we're watching together these big screens for teammates in the Mission Control Center at JPL. And we're all waiting for this signal to disappear, indicating the end of the mission. And I remember still feeling excited for that moment. And then when it dropped and they zoomed in on the team standing up, hugging each other. And then I saw my boss start to weep, cry like I've never seen him cry in my life. All of a sudden, I was crying like really hard. I think I scared my friends. I had no idea where this emotion had come from, but it finally clicked that on Monday, there was nothing to operate. This thing that had brought all these people together, all of these great people together, it had finally come to an end. And what a bittersweet end that was. But also how wonderful it was to have been included and be a part of it. And I will always look back on that experience as my fondest time here at JPL, and just eternally grateful to be taken in as considered one of the team.
Wow, that is, I mean, I'm about ready to cry. You told that story. That's amazing. And I don't even want to tell you what I was doing in 1997, but I remember when Cassini launched. Let me just put it that way. So thank you, Janelle.
I remember watching it. I remember watching it on Netflix. I think they had a story for the grand finale, as she mentioned, Cassini, and I watched it so many times. I can't believe that I'm actually getting to hear it from you. I'm so honored. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Of course, the show she's talking about is called 7 Days Out. It's a docu-series that talked about those days leading up. And if you have a sharp eye, maybe you had to catch me in the background of a couple.
I'm gonna rewatch it.
We watched that whole documentary together at the same time. They passed out the tissue boxes and we laughed like, what a joke, but we needed them.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Janelle. And Marilyn, would you, can you share with us your most memorable experience?
I'm pretty sure none of us can hold a candle to Janelle's.
That's good.
That's pretty amazing. Wow. Okay. Yeah. All of us got a little emotional there. You know, I have a moment where that literally, I think this moment changed the trajectory of my career, my professional career, to one that I'd never even anticipated or could have imagined. You know, I was a director of marketing for the Naval Air Station in Hawaii, which is originally where I'm from. And the reason I'm saying that is to explain a lot. There isn't any aviation in Hawaii, okay, other than those big giant birds that go back and forth across to the mainland that I was scared to death to get on. But anyway, so I worked at the Naval Air Station as director of marketing, and knew nothing about aviation, nor did I want to know anything about aviation. Again, hated to fly. And the commanding officer and the executive officer of the base asked to meet with me one day. And they pretty much, you know, said that we're going to do an air show, a full-blown air show with the Navy Blue Angels, and they need my help because they couldn't spend military dollars. They had to spend non-military dollars, which was sort of in my shop. And I went, okay, you know, I'm always ready to be amiable and willing to help. And I said, I have two questions though. What's an air show and who are the Blue Angels? And so they tried to explain to me what an air show was. And for the life of me, I couldn't imagine, why would anybody want to watch airplanes all day long? I mean, I literally could not imagine this. So they sent me to the mainland here, over here in the mainland, where to several military installations who put on large air shows. And I learned from them. And throughout the first year of producing this air show in the middle of the Pacific, might I mind you, you know, meant that I didn't realize that airplanes eventually ran out of fuel, because the ones that I have been on didn't run out of fuel. They go from Hawaii to the mainland, quite lovely, without having to street fuel or anything. But that was a huge aha moment, and realized the degree of difficulty that I had just jumped on, and that they forgot to share with me some of those details, like the Blue Angels have to be, you know, have in-air refueling to get to California, but they need a tanker to do that. And the Navy doesn't have any tankers, and the Blue Angels are Navy. And so the only people that have tankers are the Air Force. Great. How do I get an Air Force anyway? But through that whole process, by the end of the year and by the end of the first air show, the 3 days of air shows, and I realized on the morning after that life had no meaning anymore. That I just lived through 24/7, almost a year of adrenaline rush. And now it didn't. And I realized that the aviation bug had bit me, and it bit hard. And, I pursued after that a career in aviation, which eventually ended up in rockets and all that kind of stuff. But literally, I went from being in marketing advertising, which was my passion, that was the only thing I had ever wanted to do, to learning about airplanes and rockets, which I knew nothing about. So that was kind of my big aha moment.
That is so cool. That is so cool. And we're lucky to have you because, yeah, I mean, obviously I would never want to tell you no. I don't think it would ever work. So, you know, I don't think there's anything you can't do, Marilyn. So
thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Well, I know we are not quite out of time, but we are probably needing to wrap it up. So I think what I'm going to do is go around the panel, and I'd like to ask you guys to just sort of, you know, give some final remarks. There's a few things I'm hoping to hear about. And Marilyn, I'm going to start with you, but, you know, a few things. Definitely would like to hear, you know, a little bit more about the orbital resonance that Laura has been doing work on, a little bit more about, you know, the PhD that Niati is working on. And so anything that you guys can kind of tell us about, you know, where you're going and what you're doing and what the next step is, I think would be great for everybody to hear. So Marilyn, I'm gonna start with you.
Wow, I don't know that I have anything to add other than this has been an incredible conversation. I have learned so much from everybody, and just to hear everybody's experiences, similar, but yet so different, so unique. But I think the one common thread that we all have is that we're women. And Janet, I know you spent some time in the military, and Laura, you spent some time in the military. I did as a civilian. I worked with both the Navy and the Air Force. Definitely a man's world, because it was a long time ago. Very few women in that area, as I'm sure, Janet, you know. And, you know, for me, I learned a lot from those experiences, but also some of my greatest supporters were the men that I worked for. And to me, when I didn't know they believed that I was able to do the things that I never even considered were possible. So I think as we walk through our professional career, you know, we really realize there's going to be all kinds of supporters out there who are going to be on our side and rally for us. And we never quite know what they might look like. You know, so never just count an individual supporting you. And also don't ever think that when you're presented with the challenge, don't ever think you can't do it, because chances are you probably can.
I love that. Thank you, Marilyn. I love that. I think Niati, are you back up? I think we lost her because she was having bandwidth issues. Okay, we'll come back to her if we can. Laura, can you give us a few closing remarks and thoughts on the future?
Sure. So I actually wanted to build upon some of the thoughts that Kathleen and Niati had brought up earlier about balancing your energy, especially as high achievers. And the fact that we're all women here, meaning that we're going to be likely considering family in the near future, or already have 4 children, Kathleen. And these are very important parts of our lives. And I think sometimes it can be taboo to bring up these aspects in professional settings, but I think we do need to consider them balanced with the professional. And the fact that we are all here on a Saturday means that, you know, we maybe dip into our family time more than other people might. But like, I think that what I wanted to say is you can be a highly successful professional and still have a very loving family at the end of the day. It takes so much work. You're on 24/7, but I think it's all worth it in the end.
I agree that it's a great message, but you dodged my question about orbital resonance. So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so this is deeply technical and not a very good like ending inspiring note, but so orbital resonances, if you're familiar with the pendulum problem, at certain frequencies, a pendulum will experience chaotic motion. orbits have a similar experience when they are repeating ground traces. So they will experience the same perturbations at each time, each day. And we actually use these orbits a lot because they are seeing the same part of the Earth at the same time each day. We know when we're going to view them each day. It's good for mission planning, all these things. Even GPS uses repeating ground traces. The problem is there is chaotic dynamics with these, and they are difficult to model mathematically because you get a divide by zero problem. But it can be overcome. In my thesis, I overcame this issue doing a coordinate transformation, so applying transformation theory, and then redirecting the equations of motion to actually model these orbital resonances.
Wow.
If that's what you were for.
Yes, that's what I wanted to hear about. So the most precise signal, is GPS, and Laura has figured out how to make it even more precise through her orbital resonance research. It's just, amazing. So thank you for sharing that. Really glad to have you on, and appreciate you being here, Laura.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
All right. Well, let's see. Kathleen, can you give us a few closing remarks on, and anything else you want to share before we go?
Beautiful opportunity. Thank you so much. Feel very honored to be part. Just also really want to say yes about what you just said, Laura. Family is the most important, and don't give the scraps of like, we show up as our best self and our most energetic and beautiful leaders, and then we come home and we give the leftovers to others. So especially partners. And yes to having kids, the best thing ever. My ask, or my put out there is, we have some really great projects that we're doing right now. I'm working with Al Bowers from NASA Armstrong to create a bioinspiration project. It's already being done, but we're doing that. We have our Aero project that's connected to gliders. We're moving towards a couple of their airports to bring power in. We have an Aero pathway that we're developing. 2 different space projects. So my bottom line is, if anyone wants to be involved in any of those, or you're looking for a way to give back, and I know that you guys a lot look at like people that are in grad school, but my really goal is to get to those middle school or those babies and start widening their horizon, because often they don't have any horizon at all. And they say, yeah, I like gaming, because that's what they know. And if you said, would you like to fly, they're like, I don't know, no, never. So if you need a place or want a place to share with some kids your gifts, let me know.
Well, Kathleen, you're so inspiring for all of us. Thank you for everything you do. It's the next generation is so important. And so thank you for everything you do.
And having been set as a judge on one of Kathleen's student competitions, I can tell you our future is safe, is in good hands. These students are amazing. I wasn't doing that kind of work when I was their age by a long stretch. Seriously, they're amazing. So good job, Kathleen. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. All right, Janelle, you get the last word. Let's and then we'll wrap it up. I'll turn it back over to Marilee after you, Janelle.
Okay, so I guess starting with looking to the future, Cassini's over. It ended in 2017, and since then I've had the opportunity to work on such a diverse set of missions. One at the moon called a Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, measuring the surface temperature of the moon to help us determine where those cold spots really are, to help plan for future missions to the moon through Artemis and programs of that nature. So operating that. And I'm also on 3 Earth-based missions, because guess what? Earth's a planet too, and it's important because it's our home. Team Earthlings. 2 of them are both monitoring the surface of our oceans and the topography. That's SWAT and Sentinel-6. Sentinel-6 is actually in flight right now, and I've commanded it quite a few times, launching last November, and SWAT is slated to launch sometime next year. And the last one, which I have been spending basically most of my JPL career working on, is the multi-angle imager for aerosols, or Maya. I'm actually wearing this shirt today. And this mission is so special to me because it has a goal of measuring particulate matter or pollution in cities, different cities all around the world, so that we can do a health study with epidemiologists to determine what types of pollutions are causing health issues in people. I mean, what an important topic, with environmental causes of death being in the top 10 worldwide. I'm so excited to be a part of a mission where that is the goal at the end of the day, to do this study to helpfully inform better policy going forward. So that's what I'm up to and what's on the horizon for me. And if I'm going to leave with anything, it's that, you know, it's not possible to make it this far. You know, being this student from New Jersey with two parents who knew nothing about STEM, neither of them graduating from a four-year university, stumbling upon MIT, stumbling upon aerospace engineering, making it to NASA, which if I would have said I wanted to work for NASA when I was a kid, people would have laughed. You might as well have said, I want to be a princess. You know, no one takes it seriously. So the fact that I've been able to make it this far, it makes no sense to not reach back and bring others with me. Like, that to me is the goal at the end of the day. We have to continue to create space for good in whatever way we can, in whatever career path we have in our lives. How can we bring something positive to the world and make it so that there is a better future? So with that in mind, if my call to action is anything, it's for us to have that at the back of our hearts so that we live our lives in a meaningful way.
Beautiful, Janelle. Thank you very much. Yeah, what a great message. I just want to say it's been a true honor and pleasure to be here with all of you. And I wish we could do this for like another 2 or 3 more hours, because I have a feeling we just scratched the surface with all of you. But anyway, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. And Marilee, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Janet. Yeah, my thanks as well to this second panel. I mean, you could feel the energy coming right through the Zoom and through the voices and everything. So thanks to Janet and the panel for that. A great ending to a great program day. And I think Janelle's message too about, you know, paying it forward. I mean, everyone who participated today, all our participants, all our panel, thanks to our keynote speaker, Leslie, really we're paying it forward by taking their time, their talent, their resources, and spending it with us on this Saturday. And I know we've all have learned something about women's history in aviation, motivational comments from all of the panelists, and just such an esteemed group of women. And I really do need to give thanks to the AIAA LALV section and to the events and program chair, Ken Louie, because when he approached me first back in May to say, hey, shall we do another event to commemorate the equality in the 19th Amendment, I said, sure, let's do it. But truly, he was the one who did all the legwork in terms of through his Rolodex, an old term, but through his network, finding all the speakers, and just such a wealth of talent out there. So I want to thank him for all of his efforts. And I want to thank the AIAA LALV section for doing this commemoration program again this year. And so with that, I wish everybody a really great rest of today and the weekend, and look forward to networking with many of you in the future. So that's it for today. Thank you all again. Bye.